All right, everybody, let's go free. How's the audio? Am I coming through clearly? How is everybody doing on this lovely spring day? It's finally stopped raining in the DC metro area, which was a daily occurrence. Loud and clear, I see. Very good, thank you. WNC, good. A lot of good people I'm seeing in the chat. Hey, hello, Matt. Hello, Laurel. A lot of Zed Dez, White Knight. Angharad Celtic, yes, indeed. Shauna. And we just had our first super chat. Raymond, thank you very much for that. $10. Fast on the trigger. I like that. Back to back streams. Have a coffee on me. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will absolutely do that. Every day is a coffee day, as a matter of fact. Hello, Anne. Good to see you. Keep up the awesome work. I will absolutely stay at it. Tony, hello in return. So many great people in our rapidly growing community. I have to tell you, folks, I received so many great messages just this past week that I've been getting. I guess they were, I'm catching up on the messages that have been sent to me, but so many wonderful messages of people who are carrying forward this new energy of white well-being and taking this specific verbiage and these dialectics to their family members. And they're just having fantastic results, their lives. This is the thing, and I mentioned this on Tutar just about an hour ago, I guess it was, that people who begin their first, a lot of people, and this may still be the case with some of you, you're a little hesitant to begin using some of the lexicon, the dialectics, etc., in your life because it's so alien. It's so different from what you grew up with, what I grew up with. And you're unsure of how people are going to take it. Well, rest assured that person after person after person who has tried it, they finally get through that fear. They finally say, you know what, that sounds like an anti-white point to me. Or I think, diversity is destruction. Everywhere we look, we see the greater diversity equals a greater disharmony. It equals greater violence. The promise of the anti-whites was that as things became more diverse, we would have more harmony. But that isn't the case anywhere in Western civilization. And of course, that hasn't been the case anywhere around the world. And so it really puts these people in a place. In the past, you used to be able to make these arguments if you were anti-white and say, because none of this was happening with anyone that you were trying to sell this message to, this hateful message about white erasure to, that people just didn't experience it. So you could make this illogical argument. And if people didn't actually think about it for themselves, think about it on their own, they would likely be persuaded by the nonsense. But in fact, we now have, 10 miles, unless you live out in the middle of the country where you can have a few hundred miles where you have just a handful of people, but almost 10 miles in any direction. And you come into a community that is diverse and violent as a consequence, or you come into these enclaves that, of course, are what get created when you bring many different biospirits together, because that's what's important. Another important thing when you are, and then hearkening back to when we had Clarion on, and we're going to have her on again, perhaps this coming Friday, we might do a Going Free stream with Clarion again. I know a lot of people liked her, and I did as well. We'll have her back many times moving into the future. You have children who are taught that the difference between the race is skin color. And a lot of us were taught the same thing. And you end up talking this way with your children about the different races as though they're just different skin colors. Don't make that mistake. It is a mistake because it is a superficiality that has nothing to do with the biospirit within. White people could be purple, for God's sakes. And our flesh tone could be purple. And if our biospirits were still the same, we would still build tranquil, civil, Western civilizations everywhere we went. It has nothing to do with skin color. It has everything to do with what's on the inside. The differences between the races is not skin deep, is something I like to say. It is much deeper than that. It is as deep as our very being. So I see Ross Hunter with us. Yes, he says, very impressed with how many people he sees promoting our cause, as am I. It is, our community is really something that's growing, and it's going to be more And it should be becoming clear to an increasing number of people that it's going to be something more than what we have seen in the past, and that it's not just another promulgation of ideas. It's not just another promulgation of perhaps a prescription even that is really impossible to carry out, to execute. And that's really what we have here when it comes to these Yang people, which we're going to be talking about today. And I want to get a lot of your thoughts from the chat today about what they think is going on. There are a lot of important things that are tangential and even directly related to this Yang phenomenon that are important for us as a people to learn these lessons from, so that we can become a healthier, stronger people. I didn't get an opportunity to speak to a point I wanted to make early on Tutar earlier, because I wanted to give Greg an opportunity to respond to some of the things that Mark was saying, since Greg was the only one on that panel who was really in favor of Yang and UBI. It was the three of us who objected to it. So I wanted to give Greg the opportunity. But essentially what I wanted to say is, Greg, and I would like to have heard his response to this, but Greg and a lot of people who are talking about supporting Yang in this presidential cycle, or this run up to the nomination for the Democrat Party, they talk about how it's a good thing for us because we get to talk about X, Y, or Z. There's a big difference between supporting a candidate and using something a candidate said to advance our objectives, to move toward our goal of recapturing our destiny. So the point that I did get to make is that you should be able to take something that Yang says. Now, this is dependent on the prospect that you are speaking to. If the prospect is someone who would give credence to something that a Democrat politician has said, they would be persuaded by something that a Democrat politician has said, you should be able to, in the morning, in the AM, take something that Yang said, that say about the opioid crisis in our community. You should be able to take that and then say, look, this politician that you give credence to because he's a Democrat has even mentioned the opioid crisis in the white community. And then you can use that as a conversation starter to then move into other things. However, in the PM, you should be able to go to a different prospect who perhaps despises the Democrats and Democrat politicians. And you should be able to say, look at what this politician said. This politician, Yang, said that they need to placate the white population because they are cognizant of their movement from being this foreign people in this foreign body into the leadership role, into the leaders and masters of the white race, the founding stock of Western civilization. And they're concerned that the founding stock is going to resist this at some point, that the founding stock will stand up. In fact, they expect that a healthy founding stock will fight for their well-being, will fight for their creation, their society. So you should be able to use Yang in a positive sense in the AM, and then in saying one thing, and then you should be able to use him again in the PM in a negative sense, saying another. You should have that agility when it comes to attempting to persuade friends, family, and strangers. That is our mission, is to bring people into the cause of white well-being, to get them going free, to get them using this lexicon, to get them using these dialectics. That is what we have to do. It is not, and we'll talk a little bit about this today as we're going free, about voting and whether or not you should either vote or put a lot of effort into voting. It's something that's really important that needs to be discussed, because we have to, as I think I put in the title of this stream, we have to stop looking to individuals. Certainly, we shouldn't be looking to non-white individuals as our saviors, as they're going to do all of the work for us. No, my friends, you are going to have to do the work. I am going to have to do the work. We have to spread this curative contagion of going free to our friends, family, and strangers. And it's going to be like a hockey stick graph. It's going to suddenly grip the nation, and we will have a context change. And when that happens, things will open up to us that weren't heretofore available. And where once we saw no hope, where once we saw nothing but, we see this Article 13 or whatever it was in the EU, this censorship on speech, just another excuse to censor speech is all it is. So forget about the details. what does it really matter? You know, it'll be applied selectively, and you know it's another set of excuse that they could just jot down, and then they could abide by it or break those rules or dilate them or shrink them. It doesn't matter to them. And then you also have this thing with Facebook, and they'll say, well, any speech that benefits white people is hate speech, and so therefore we're going to ban it from Facebook. All of this censorship is just this giant tenebrous cloud that comes over us. That is the context in which we are in. But as we spread this curative contagion to more and more of our brothers and sisters across the Western world, the broad middle class of our people, with the sensibilities that we share with them, once we spread this to them, they will start going free, and things will rapidly change for us. Options will rapidly change. Money will be available. Contacts will be available. Opportunities will appear. So what I did want to say earlier was, Greg was saying, and it's the tangential point I was making about being able to use yang in the AM in a positive sense to persuade one prospect, being able to use him in the negative sense in the PM to persuade a different prospect. The other route that Greg is talking about doing is supporting a candidate because that candidate is going to raise particular subject matter. This is where I think Greg is going wrong. If you support yang, you are doing something very deleterious for yourself and our people spiritually. It is even worse than putting all of your faith in somebody like Trump. Look at what Trump has done for so many of us. So many of our people are so gut shot, as we say in the South and maybe in the rest of America as well, over Trump. They feel that they've been betrayed. They feel that they've been let down by Trump. And that is because they put too much faith in him. They thought, well, I can make the robocalls. I can knock on doors for the Republican Party. I could do X, Y, Z. I can help to get this guy elected because he's making promises to me that will directly or indirectly serve white well-being. And therefore, when he gets into office, these things will be manifest. And then, of course, they're not manifest. And so they feel betrayed by that. How betrayed will you be by putting faith into a non-white for positive things for our community? It is deleterious. And not only that, you set yourself up to be betrayed. You set yourself up to be humiliated, because you're going to say these supportive things of yang, and then he's going to come out next week or the week after, and he's going to tell people how low your intelligence is. Those people who care about white well-being, how low their intelligence is, how uneducated they are, how they need to be treated for psychoses. And you are going to look like an absolute fool for supporting him as soon as he says that. So it is nothing but deleterious for us. There is no option excuse me, when it comes to a non-white individual serving white well-being. It will never happen. There will be no great non-white leader who will directly or indirectly serve white well-being. It will all be harmful. There is no answer there for us. That is a good answer. So let me look at some of the chat here. Looks like Odin super chatted all the way down from what is it, Valhalla? Or where does Odin live? Somebody tell me. $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Anyone else feel like this Yang Gang thing is a giant inside joke that you aren't a part of? No matter how I try, I just can't work out the logic. There is no logic. Well, let me rephrase that. There's logic in the sense, hello, Kaiser, good to see you. There is logic in the sense, everyone. This is where this Yang thing is coming from. This is a temporary psychosis. People invested their lives in Trump. They invested all of their hopes, all of their dreams. And if you all remember, and I want to hear from some of you in the chat, I know that some of you will remember me telling you all not to do that. Me telling you all, whatever you do, never invest your hopes and your dreams and etc. in a politician, because they always let you down. It doesn't matter what politician it is, they're always going to let you down. Unless Andrew Jackson crawls out of his grave tomorrow, then I would agree. Go ahead and invest your hopes and dreams in a politician. He would be a statesman, though, not a politician. But yet Laurel says that she remembers me saying that. I warned you all because I care about you. I don't want you to get into this depression. I don't want you to get into this saturnine state where you thought all was going to be well, or at least infinitely better, by securing a particular individual in an office. And then when it doesn't happen, you end up thinking that's the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. It wasn't the beginning of the world when Trump got elected. You should not feel betrayed by him, because it was your error to begin with to think that all of this was going to come to fruition. It is very much like having a relationship with a man or woman, and you think that the man or woman is a certain person, and you then read things into their thoughts. You then read into their behaviors, what you want to see, what you would like to see. And then when that person turns out to be something completely different, your heart is broken and you want to turn away as swiftly as you can. You want to 180 degrees away from that individual. That is what's happening with Yang. It's the exact same phenomenon that is happening. People feel betrayed. Now they want to run away and they want to hurt Trump by showing that we've found somebody that's completely different from you. Now we've got this new mate. Now we've got this new person we're going to follow that's completely different from you. And that'll really show you for betraying us. If you feel betrayed by Trump and you want to harm him in some way, harm his candidacy in some way, harm his public persona in some way, don't run off and make another fool of yourself, because effectively you made a fool of yourself. Even if you're the only one who knows, you have to look in the mirror and you know. If you made a fool of yourself by believing that Trump was going to be the great savior and all of this God emperor silliness, if you believed that and now you feel betrayed, don't make a second fool of yourself by then running off to some non-white Asian and concluding that he is somehow going to do something good for you. He's going to somehow do something good for our people. It is like watching the oh gosh, what were those? They were called soap operas, I guess, that back in the day, and perhaps they still are aired. I don't know, but it's like it's all of these like flying emotions, all this histrionics, from one love to the next, from one broken heart to the next. It's just like watching that. And so I strongly encourage, I admonish all of you to not do this with Yang. Effectively, what you did with Trump, turn around and do with Yang now. And there are also, of course, and I pointed out there are nuances to this Yang business. There are people who see it as an opportunity to raise a couple specific subjects. I think that's where Josh Neal was coming from in my conversation with him. There are other people who are just absolutely juvenile. Neoteny has followed them into adulthood, and they like saying the phrase Yang Gang. Of course, I spoke to them with the memes that I had created when I said that they were drinking the Yang Tang and jumping on the Yang Wang. And that is exactly what those, unfortunately, when it comes to those kinds of people, you're not dealing with people that are serious or people that are going to be able to do our community any good. I would rather have 100 solid, good men and women than 10,000 losers. We will do more with 100 solid men and women, infinitely more than somebody else can do with 10,000 losers. I promise you that. That has been the case everywhere throughout human history. You can think about the Pareto distribution, if you'd like, and how that plays a role in what I'm saying right now, the point I'm making. We will do far more with valuable, good men and women than other people will do with teeming hordes of losers that just want to giggle about Yang gangs and other such nonsense. So how's everybody doing? Let's see. I want to remind everybody that if you want to super chat and you do not want YouTube or Google taking 33% of your super chat will still get read. If you want to do that, you can dig down into the description of the video and you will find a familiar alternative that you can use for super chatting. Also, if you want me to feel free to speak directly to me in the chat. I want to hear what you all have to say. If you want to make sure or up the chances that I will see what you have to say, make sure you tag me in your statement, because I will then get I'll be more likely to see you in the chat. Looks like Kaiser is asking, when can he get a wrench? Well, we have a process for handing out wrenches, my good friend, and you are now in that process. I will let you know. Beyond tagging me, if you want to absolutely 100% make sure that I see what you have to say and read what you have to say, then you can super chat. And super chatting, of course, is available on YouTube, but also available by way of the other familiar alternative that you will find in the description. And as far as I know, it is still working. Resurrection Jose writes, the best way to harm Trump is to vote for another Republican. Well said. I mean, I think that if you want to create memes, create a meme of Trump sitting on Netanyahu's lap, a nice little lap dog for our masters down in that part of the world who the tail wags the dog when it comes to the United States and Israel. I'd like to ask you all, before we get into some of the material that I have here, if you could please tweet the stream, gab the stream, post it to your Facebook page, and also post it to your minds and anything else. I see Shauna says, hello, great to see you, another valuable member of our community. Silly Sad asks, have you read my argument for UBI? I have not read your argument for UBI. If you go to my website, you can write to me directly by way of my website, and you can send me that in email form. I'll be happy to take a look at it. I see Michael saying, hey, Jason, great to see you. Great to see you all here today. Let me get a drink. We're talking about coffee. And the coffee that was purchased for me very early in the stream. Hello, Sen526. Great to see you. Syrup, of course, a great pleasure as always. Syrup is indefatigable, just a master at the cause of white well-being. So happy to see you here, good sir. Freedom Fighter says, hail no white guilt. Hail in return, brother. We're making things happen. Ang Hara donated $30 by way of that familiar alternative down in the description. So she did a little bit of a deep dive and writes, I agree that the Yang Gang support is collective lunacy. Yang is not our pal. Absolutely not our pal. In fact, and there I see the Great Order has shown up. And well done, sir. Good to see you. Says he's posting. Spartan Warrior Queen is here as well. Well, looks like all we have to do is blow, as in the I say in Prometheus Rising in my book, all we have to do is blow the great, brilliant silver trumpets, and the heroes come to the call. Fantastic. America Only, $5 super chatting. Thank you very much for that. Yang is only a tool to push forth. He is nothing more. He will not even pass the primary. We are using him for political warfare against our enemies. Well said. Use anything, as I said earlier in the stream, if there's something positive that he said that you can use for a particular prospect, use it. If there's something negative that he said that you can use for another prospect, use it. You should be able to love on Yang and hate on Yang in the same hour. It should all serve. Everything you're doing should serve our well-being. Do not wed yourself to this candidate, ladies and gentlemen. You will end up looking like a fool. I don't want that to. We are not Prometheans. Do not look like fools. We serve white well-being. We are masters of our destiny. We do not allow our circumstances to control us. We are in control of our lives. And one of the ways that circumstances can control us is this idea of UBI, and we're going to be going into that in many different ways. But one of the biggest issues with UBI is that you have, in order to implement something like a UBI program, you have to effectuate a number of Herculean tasks that are simply not even remotely possible in the real world. So I ask you, do not be a clubbist. Do not do these things. Over the years in the movement, I've been in the calls for white well-being a long time. Great to see Philosophicat here. Philosophicat. Great to see Kat here in the chat as well. Michael Owen, does no white guilt believe in God? I absolutely believe in a creator, my good friend. How could there not be with the beauty of this cosmos? But let's see. I do have another, whipping post. Looks like by way of the familiar alternative has strapped on the diver's gear and dove down into the description and has written, just want to say to chat, never give up. We will win this. Super chatting $10. Thank you so very much. A whipping post for that. I wonder if that was your first super chat. Thank you very much if it was. I don't recognize the name. So many good people here. Sonia, amen to that. No white guilt. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being here. Dixie, good to see you. Thank you for being here as well. We are Prometheans, folks. Prometheans are masters of our destiny. We do not allow ourselves to be dragged along to these ideas that we're going to implement some program, in this case UBI, that requires these like solar system shifting things to be done before it can be implemented. And in fact, Greg Johnson, I wish I had the opportunity to interact some with him on this issue. He said, well, we need, I took a note here. He said, well, we would have to close down the border for UBI. Well, why don't we just do that now? Right? So we'd have to put up a wall. We'd have to close the border. We'd have to stop immigration, not just a wall, but stop immigration. Why don't we just do that now? We would have to, let me see, what else did he say? We would have to extirpate some of these colossal bureaucracies would have to be removed from the government. Bureaucracies like the current welfare department. Why don't we just do that now? I was speaking with Josh the other night, and he was raising some cogent thoughts about the subject, and he was saying, well, we have so much waste in so many of these departments. And indeed, I, in fact, to support his point, pointed out that when it comes to Medicaid and Medicare, we lose billions every year to corruption in those programs. So he says, well, we have all of this corruption. Would we just clean this up? We would have the money for UBI. Why don't we just clean it up now? Why don't we just do these things now? Greg even went on to say that if we're going to implement something like a UBI, then we're going to need a new ethos for society so that we can have, as he referred to on Tutar, so that we could have this Spartan-esque society. Well, why don't we just do that now? Before we talk about these things that can only happen after we do these universe shifting, these constellation shifting things in our universe, before we talk about that, we have to talk about changing the universe that we live in, don't we? And what use is that to white well-being? How far are we moving forward with white well-being? By discussing things that are just infinitely not possible right now. They are challenges that are not before us. What do we need to be talking about? You and me. What do we need to be talking about? We need to be talking about how to get your mother-in-law to stop saying anti-white things around your children. We need to be talking about how to reach that nephew who's right on the cusp. Is he going to end up going anti-white? Is he going to end up serving white well-being and becoming an advocate for our people? Maybe even becoming a Promethean. Those are the things, those are the challenges that are before us. Those are the things we have to talk about that are real. Now, I've mentioned this before. Many of you may not know that, what I'm about to say. I worked for a company where I was sent to business holdings that were in the red. They were going out of business. They were on the verge of being defunct. They were taking money from the rest of the parent company rather than giving money, bringing money into the parent company. I was sent to these places and I brought them back into the black time and again. How was I able to do that? I wasn't able to do that because I looked at challenges that weren't faced by those business holdings. I looked at the challenges that were right in front of that business and it being successful. And then we surmount those challenges. That is how the scientific method works. That is how human achievement works. It doesn't work by discussing topics that have no bearing whatsoever on whether we are going to achieve our objectives or not. That can be those, it's not that those things can never be talked about, but that is more for like, the parlor where you get together with friends and intellectuals get together and they discuss these sort of things as something to take your mind off the very real and necessary work that we need to be doing as a community. We can't be fantasizing, for God's sakes. We do not have time to fantasize about getting to white well-being when we have to take steps to white well-being. So these are important things that we need to. This is why investing yourself, your time, your hope, your belief in a politician, be it a President Trump or something as ignorant as a Yang, is going to do nothing but harm you, not only just in the long run, but even in the short run. Because what does that do to you psychologically? The conservatives are suffering from the same phenomenon. They put their faith in non-whites. They do this because they have a incorrect understanding of the motivations of anti-whites. They're taking the anti-whites at their word, at face value for the things they say, the pretexts that they advance. And based on that assessment of those pretexts, they conclude erroneously, because it's an incorrect understanding, that a non-white can advance conservative principles and can then carry the actual movement forward. But that's not the case. We see non-whites are still slandered, non-white conservatives are still slandered as Nazis. It is sickening to me to hear people who consider themselves in the white positive sphere in one form or another saying Yang will be able to talk about the harm that's being done to the white community because he's non-white. I felt like my head exploded. I was in the midst of the conservatives again, hearing something that was that juvenile. Of course he can't. Does anybody know? And let's get to the chat. Does anybody know? Let's see. I'm going to run through this. Why is it? Well, I get a drink of water. Why is it that Yang is able to say the things he is saying right now about white drug use, or why is he saying these things right now? Are they for some sort of permanent platform that he's going to attempt to carry all the way up to the presidency and into his first term as president? Or is it carnival barking? He's trying to get attention so that he can get donors and he can get support from the real power holders behind the scenes in the Democrat Party so that he can then get an opportunity to run for the nomination. What is it? What are your thoughts? I think Odin said that he thinks he's trying to break the right space. Well, that could be a side effect. I want you all to think about this from the perspective of Yang himself and his handlers. What do they want at this moment? Yang right now is not even considered a joke by the Democrat Party. So he needs what? You're Yang right now. You're suddenly this Asian male, all right? You're suddenly this Asian male. You want your party to give you attention. You want your party to allow you to have the opportunity to speak, to participate in these debates. What are your strategies? I see Way of the World is here. Great to see you, brother. I'm writing Yang is an unhelpful distraction. He absolutely is. Very unhelpful. Right now, what Yang needs to do, he and his handlers, need to get attention on him. How do you get attention? You carnival bark. Nobody does it better than Donald Trump. He did a fabulous job at getting people's attention on him and then carrying that attention from week to week to week to week. And it's endless, the brilliance behind that. That is what Yang is trying to do. He's talking about something that absolutely stuns his base, that stuns his party. It gets everyone. If he says some of the typical Democrat Party talking points, who in that party is going to look at him? Not a soul. Not a single person is going to look at him. If he tries to go even more radical than the rest of his party with some of their views, aren't there already a number of Democrat politicians doing that? He will have done nothing. No, he's got to get attention on himself right now. So you need to understand these things from the context in which the individual who is making these steps, saying these things, that context that they are in at that moment, and the selfish reasons, the objectives that they are trying to serve in that moment. Yang is merely attempting to get attention from his party. Once the eyes are on him, once he has the attention, he can then qualify everything he has said. Do you see how this works? Do you see how they manipulate you? So he didn't say that. He didn't say anything about white people for your benefit, for God's sake. He said it to rock his party, to get everybody's attention focused on him, and then he'll qualify it later if he gets an opportunity. His campaign manager knows very well how to walk those statements back. Very well. And then he comes out with this, and I'll point out, I had a good friend send me a tweet of Yang's where he's dog whistling. If you all, and you tell me in the chat, have you all heard how Democrats speak about Trump voters? Do they not, and have they not referred to them as problems? Because I have, and others have as well. Have any of you heard Democrats refer to Trump voters as problems? That people are problems. Andre says yes, absolutely. I see Michael's asking my thoughts on Nuremberg race laws. I'm afraid I'm unfamiliar with, I have never read the laws. I've heard of it, of course. All right, so yes, I'm saying people are saying yes, they have heard that. Yang just tweeted the other day that what he says, what we need to do is we need to beat Trump at the box, and then the ballot box, and then take care of these problems that got him elected. I can read the actual. I have it. I believe I have it here. So what does he mean? Is he not dog whistling there when he's talking about taking care of the problems? Let's see. He says, I always believe that the job is to beat Trump at the ballot box and then solve the problems that got him elected. The problems that got him elected. That is a dog whistle, my friends. What does Yang mean by solve the problems? It almost sounds like a final solution to me. We have researched the Seville 4 super chatting with $5. Thank you very much for that kind super chat. I think it's the first time you have I've seen you super chat, so I thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for coming to our rapidly expanding community. If you all could please, again, at this point, and we'll get into some more of this material, tweet, Gab, Facebook, and Minds, and whatever other social media platforms you're on, remember that they are censoring the hell out of us because they know that this information is reaching the people and curing them of this anti-whiteism with which they are infected. So that was an enormous dog whistle to his base. to the Democrat base. You're going to solve the problems that got Trump elected. I don't know how you solve the people problem uh, without it sounding like it's some sort of final solution. So that's what I would say to you all. I want you to think about Yang for a moment, from the perspective of his supporters or supporters of the Democrat Party. He said something that absolutely shocked them. He said, well, what about white people and their opioid problem? And then he dog whistles that we're going to take care of them. We're going to solve that problem. Has he not just sent two dueling messages there? And then is it not something that he can qualify and take any direction he wants? This is the con man's game, friends. You need to be ahead of this. DL super chats with $2. Thank you very much for that. He took a picture with Nick Fuentes, Yang Gang 2020. Nick Fuentes, you're saying, has a picture with Yang Gang? Does Nick Fuentes support the Yang Gang? Is he on the Yang Wang? Is Nick Fuentes drinking the Yang Tang? I don't know. Does anybody in the chat know? We're having the typical, just so you know, folks, what I'm doing right now is I just outwitted one of their little technical glitches that they like to pull when I stream from time to time. So they'll have to find a new way to make that happen. Guys and gals over there at YouTube, good luck. Okay, let's see now what people are saying. So I asked, does anybody know about Fuentes? Is he drinking the Yang Tang as well? Didn't it seem, somebody give me a list of names of the people who Nick. Okay, so we have Where the World Says Nick is all for the $1,000. Okay, we have to talk about that. This is going to be as I just said, I was sent because of my education, because of my abilities, intelligence, whatever, what have you, two businesses to pull them out of the red, and I succeeded every time to pull them out of the red. So I know a little bit about economics. I know a little bit about how demand and supply works, and that anybody would think that something like a UBI would work if they claim to have any knowledge in these areas is demonstrating some sort of maybe emotional block or some sort of ignorance, perhaps. I don't know. Perhaps Nick can explain himself, because it is supremely asinine to think that UBI is something that could work for some of the reasons I stated already. Juan writes, Yang is no good, but you would be shocked by how many Asians love the beauty of the whites. No, I wouldn't be shocked. In fact, I have spoken. I grew up in the DC metropolitan area. We have every single race on planet Earth is here. Both the good people from those races and the rest of them all coming from the sewers around the world. We have them all. And I have heard a great many Asians talk about, especially the older ones. Not the younger ones are anti-white, almost all of them. But the older ones remember when they admired everything about Western civilization, and they had been passed down. They had talked about this and had been passed down to them from their elders, all of the great accomplishments of the white race, all of the things that had never been done by any other people, and how they wanted to imitate us because clearly we were doing something that was worthy of imitation in their eyes. So yes, no, I've talked with Asians that have absolutely are full in the admitting their, I guess, how much they admire Western civilization and the white race. And many of those that I've spoken with over the years have expressed a bit of shock at how the white race is throwing everything away. And they wonder that something, then they could tell something is amiss, something is not quite right. So let's get into, we did have super chat. Patrick Henry, great name for your YouTube account. $5 super chatting. Thank you so much. Yang is a Chi-Com infiltrator. I'm not sure what that is. Chinese communist, is that what that means? How do those of us who are isolated find and form groups without being targeted and infiltrated? Yes, indeed. That's a tough subject. And there are groups out there that are getting together. I encourage that when you talk with people online and then you decide you're going to perhaps go meet them, make it someplace public. I have met many people in the cause. I can't even count. A great many people in the cause. Now, of course, yes, I'm physically fit. I'm in America. I'm in Virginia, where you can carry a gun on your hip if you want. Uh, I can fight. So for me, it was probably less dangerous than for many, but certainly for ladies. But make it a very public space where you're going to meet. Maybe park your vehicle if you're worried about the person for some time. Park your vehicle some distance away, though still in a populated place, so that you'll be able to walk up to the destination and not have to worry about your vehicle being photographed or your license plate or something like this. And then trust your instincts. Know that anybody who is advocating any sort of criminality or any sort of violence, etc., is a bad actor, and never speak with them again. If they say they're intending to commit some sort of criminal act, tell law enforcement. You will go to jail, even if that's an undercover cop uh, who is saying that they're going to commit this sort of law, break this sort of crime, or commit this sort of act. You will go to jail. Don't bother with, but it's this, but it's that. You know they will find a way to put you in jail. So if somebody says they're going to break the law, you immediately call law enforcement and tell them about it. If somebody advocates criminality or violence, you let them know once that you're not going to tolerate it again for the reasons we've talked about before. And then you either end that relationship, or you move forward. And you both are stronger for it, because now your thoughts can be on something that's actually productive. I mean, thinking about politics and putting your time into a politician is just as asinine as being for overthrowing the state. I mean, both are impossibilities. So it's an absolute waste, or an impossibility to achieve our objective. So it's asinine. Work on things that can get things done. And please stop thinking that some act that you can do, that act is too small to have a huge effect, because it's all of our acts together. What are those things called in the dinoflagellates? They're called dinoflagellates. Look them up. They're these like almost microscopic organisms, and they put off this absolutely infinitesimally small amount of light, just almost nothing. But when you get so many of them together and they get agitated, it's usually by waves that they get agitated, or maybe the tail of a big animal in the water swatting the top of the water. They light up, and since there are so many of them lighting up together at the same time, the light emanates, this brilliant like blue emanates from the seawater. When it happens in the waves, it's truly remarkable thing to see. I've never seen it in person. I've only read about these things. You can, if somebody can correct me if I've got the wrong name, dinoflagellate. But that is how your act magnifies everything that all of us are doing. So I spoke with a woman today who put up a couple stickers today from 100 Handers. Your act today, your little something today, is going to be coupled with all of the others, and then we will make the oceans glow. That is how this works. Don't look at the little things that you can do as something that's too small to affect the change. Remember, our objective is not to plant the flag of victory on the lawns of all of our Capitol buildings. Our objective today is to change the context we are in, and that to do that, we spread this curative contagion. We get people looking in. Underhill asked if it's plankton. No, it's dinoflagellates, I'm pretty sure, is what they're called. Let's see what anybody else had to say. I thought I may have missed a super chat. Let's see here. Michael writes, admiration, talking about the Asians, turns into envy and turns into hate. That is actually the jealousy and envy is the basis of all of anti-whiteism. If we can talk about that in the future, it's in my book Go Free, which a second edition of which I am working on. That is what Clarion has assisted me with to make that a little bit more user friendly, if you will. And we talk about that in the book. That jealousy and envy is the basis of anti-whiteism, and that is really what causes the fanaticism in these people. What drives the anti-whites to drive, pun intended, from a moment ago, to drive hundreds of miles to go and protest a speaker who's going to be saying something that will, in some way, it doesn't have to be pro-white, in some way, or white positive, in some way, it's going to inhibit the infliction of harm on Western kind and Western civilization, and the anti-whites will show up like raving lunatics. The reason they're able to do that is because of where anti-whiteism starts in them as a people. And it happens, it's the exact same process for a white person who's anti-white as a non-white person who is anti-white. Nobody Guilt's a longtime fighter for our people. God bless him. No, God bless you. Thank you for being here. I deeply appreciate the support. We are moving. We are making things happen. Every day, this movement gets stronger. Every day, we get brighter. DL Super Chats with $2. Thank you so much. America first. 345, Fuentes explains Yang's support. Episode 345. He explains his support of Yang. Well, we had Way of the World mention that he supports UBI, which, of course, we spoke about earlier, why UBI won't work. And that is the very first reason I gave, I think, in the stream, the Going Free stream today, is that it is nonsensical to discuss a program and whether or not we should push for someone to be in office. I mean, just think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes this kind of thinking about UBI, thinking about any program that an individual might hold, and then determining whether or not we should endorse that individual because they hold that idea, they want to implement a certain program. But in order to implement that program, we effectively have to go implement it on Mars. Because it would be easier to take a one-way trip to Mars than it would be to rip the welfare department out of this country, out of this government, or the other governments of the West. It would be easier to take a one-way trip to Mars than it would be to build a wall and put an end to immigration into this country. It would be easier to take a one-way trip to Mars than to change the ethos of the country we live in so that we could then implement something like UBI. Please, let's be sensible. We don't have the time or the luxury to sit on our asses and fantasize about how we can make the world better or how our lives could be made better if the world looked just like the fantasy in our heads. It doesn't. It's the real world we have to live with. If you have people that you like to, content producers that you like to watch, and they want to go off into Maryland fantasy world, turn them off at that point. Nothing they're saying is useful to you. Nothing they're saying is useful to our people. They are doing a bit of carnival barking of their own in most cases. They're just coming up with something to talk about to get your eyeballs on them so that you'll give them money, so that you will give them attention, so that you will give them subs, so that you will spread their name out there so that they can get more money and more subs. That's all they're doing, so they can get more attention. If you all come here, if I could take this curative contagion and I could just give you a shot and be done, I would never need to see you again. If you want to be my friend, I would like that. If you want to come back and see me again, that would be fine. I don't need your attention, though. I need you to get healed. I need you to go free so that you can then get those in your life, your friends, family, and strangers, to go free. If you are really giving your time or money to a content producer that is talking about a subject for which we would have to move heaven and earth to first before we could begin to talk about the implementation of that, you need to give them a lot less of your time and money. Does that make sense? We need to get to business. When a ditch needs to be dug, we got to pick up the shovel and start digging the damn ditch. We can't fantasize about what it would be like if our house was up on stilts when the river is swelling. We need to dig the damn ditch. We got some super chats coming in. Pamela super chatting $20. Thank you so much for that grand super chat, my friend. Red Ice member here. Hello, all other Red Ice members. Well, hello to you all indeed. Henrik and Lana are a great couple, and we are very lucky to have them in the cause for white well-being. Seaman No Suk super chatting $5. Thank you very much. Google Sweden Hills, Japan. Japanese love the Swedish people. It's sad seeing how Sweden wants to import 10 million Chinese Muslims. That is precisely, I mean, that is a perfect example of this runaway ideology of anti-whiteism that is, pardon me, leading our people directly to perdition. Directly to perdition. You know what needs to be said to those people? What needs to be said? You people are learning how to go free. You are going free in your lives. You're making the effort. What needs to be said to the leaders of Sweden? Do we need to tell them about how Sweden doesn't have the economy to support the Chinese Muslims? Do we need to talk about how Sweden doesn't have the infrastructure to support that many more people in the country? No, we need to be talking about why the hell are they so anti-white that they want to erase white people and white culture from the country created by white people. That's the question that those leaders need to be asked, and they need to be asked it again and again and again until they have to defend themselves so much that they have to take a white positive position to get out from under that charge. Does that make sense? You talk about whether or not there is the economic ability, whether or not there's the infrastructure, and those imbeciles will come up with answers, even if they're nonsensical. Look at what people are already able to believe. They're able to believe something as stupid as UBI being a possibility, that it would benefit anyone, that it would somehow benefit us in the cause for white well-being. Elaine Sabatino, super chatting with $5. Thank you so much. Another absolutely valuable member of our community. I love every single one of you. We are becoming the shining city on the hill. And when we start to have our towns, when we start to have our communities come to fruition, when these ideas, and folks, it will happen this year. This year, there will be physical instantiation of these ideas. Physical instantiation of the process of going free. You will see it this year, 2019. As I said before, this is the year of the first Western sunrise, and every year thereafter, the sun will rise in the West. Elaine Sabatino writes, "Don't drink the Yang Tang." Love it. Yang is afraid of white men acting out, while black on Asian violence is an epidemic. Thanks, No White Guilt. Thank you for making that great point. The Asians, where they enclave and they begin to recreate their biosphere and their environment around them, the Asians end up also in gangs and in warfare against other non-white races. It is an extremely problematic scenario for the West that we have so many of these different groups, and they all are coming to numerical courage. And increasingly, since, even the 80s, increasingly are going to war with each other. Johnny Jones super chats $20, doesn't write anything, but thank you very much for that, Johnny, for that fantastic super chat. So glad to see you all here. So glad we're moving forward to recapturing our destiny with everything that we're talking about. So let's get into the conversation and let's move through this with some intent. Like I said, the first thing that I wanted to mention was that, and I mentioned this with Josh the other night, if we're going to have a discussion, and you and I are going to have a discussion about how do we get from A to Z, we have to have the same Z in common. If we don't have the same Z, if we don't have the same objective, we're just having a shouting match about, is my position or point more important than your position or point? So when all of those blood sport so-called debates were taking place, none of those were actual debates. The participants didn't have the same objective. Since they didn't have the same objective, you can't really debate whether or not one person's interests are more important or one group's interests are more important than another group's interests, because sane people of both groups are going to conclude that their group's interests are the most important. Really, only the white race. You're only going to find in our community, because of the meme pathogens, are you going to find people that say, well, it's not our interests that matter. It's the other people's interests. Or they'll really try to get on some sort of fake moral high ground and say, well, it's everybody's interest. Well, of course, there's no such thing as that. They're the only people saying that. So there's no such thing. While the other groups fight for their interests, these liars fight for everybody's interest, which means they have to negate their own, and they think there's some sort of legitimacy in firing on their own side. But of course, there isn't any legitimacy there. They just get shot in the back when they turn around to shoot at us. That's what happens with all traitors of their people. They're never remembered. Underhill writes, what does that mean, physical instantiation? That means that there will be a physical activities, physical structures that demonstrate that going free is something more than just a conversation that we are having. It's something more than a set of ideas. It already is, but I have to explain that every time. I have to explain that this is something that we are taking human psychology and culture into consideration and weaving those together for something that's brand new. Not just another set of ideas, not another diagnosis. Haven't you all seen enough of that? Haven't you all seen enough of these diagnoses of what this person says is wrong in society, and this other person says this is what's wrong in society? And then these flaccid prescriptions about how to go from these bad scenarios to someplace better. It's particularly flaccid when the step that they discuss taking is a step that begins after you reshape our entire universe, a step that can't even be taken until we rewrite the world. So haven't you had enough of that? Aren't you ready for something new? Aren't you ready for something that's going to make you healthier? Something that's going to enable you to be physically healthier? Something that's going to enable you to be mentally healthier, spiritually healthier? Something that's going to enable you to win the conversations, to win the arguments that you have with that irritating cousin that you have? Something that's going to be able to put that father-in-law in his place once and for all. And you're not gonna have to walk away from that scenario feeling like you're the one who is immoral and somehow done something wrong. That now he is going to have to walk away as the immoral one who has done something wrong. And more importantly, winning those new people, those family members, those friends to our cause, to the cause of going free. Because every new person we bring in is a magnification that themselves they then magnify, and this becomes something truly grand as we move forward. So that is what we need to be doing. The stop with all of the old. I mean, this is something I've been sharing with a few folks lately. I mean, really, does this come down the old methods, these antiquated methods? Is the act of losing with these antiquated methods so comfortable that you don't want to try something new? Is it so comfortable to lose with all of these old prescriptions and diagnoses? Is that so comfortable that you would rather stay there and continue losing than try going free and recapturing our destiny? That is a question you have to ask inside of your own hearts, because it takes some effort. It takes some courage to try these new dialectics, to try this new lexicon with friends and family and strangers. Try it on strangers if you must. Just only on strangers in the subways or someplace, obviously where you're safe. Don't put yourself at risk. Looks like Roy Danton just super chatted $4.99. Just wanted to say hi. Thank you very much for for that, Roy. A proud and great member of our community. Great to see you here, folks. If you haven't thumbs up the stream, please like it. Please ring the bell and subscribe. If you have already subscribed and click the bell, make sure that you're still subscribed and the bell is still clicked, because the anti-whites are trying to do everything they can to shut us down. You know, one of the best ways to help your circles of influence to go free is to introduce them to these going free streams. You don't have to say all of these things to get these people headed in the right direction. You can send them here. This is not at your typical white positive sphere space where there are going to be loony things being said, that things that are too reminiscent of what Hollywood has taught the population about those who care about white well-being. Because we don't feel those ways. We don't act that way. That is not part and parcel of who and what we are. We love our people. We like everyone, but we love our people. And if no one is going to object to that except the most debased anti-white out there, and so be it. We don't need them. Move aside from them, move away from them, and just head on to the next prospect. So we have to have the same objective before we move forward. We all have the same objective. We all want to recapture our destiny for Western kind. We understand that many people are feeling that Trump has betrayed them, and they're suffering from this temporary psychosis, and they're trying to turn away to this yang. And this is a movement of redemption. We make mistakes. If you have made the mistake of jumping on the yang wang, acknowledge that you made the mistake and come back to reality, that there's no good is going to come from that. Let's move forward to something productive. I talked about, and I'm not going to do it again, when it came to assumptions. I spoke with Josh about all of the assumptions that need to be made, and we've essentially touched on that already. There is when I was with Josh on No Apologies, I read through a list of assumptions. They were just, back of the envelope type of assumptions that we had to make in order to talk about Yang being in office and implementing these things. And it is so insurmountable. It really showed how juvenile the conversation was. I know Josh felt it. I felt it. It was something that just really reduced it to reality and demonstrated. I mean, we might as well break out our little plastic fake teacups and have a tea party, because that's what the Yang conversation really is. That's what UBI really is. If we're going to talk about UBI and Yang, and I'll just please bring in the plastic teacups and we'll have ourselves a little tea session. I would much rather have that little play session with a young, beautiful white little girl, and allow her to tell me her fantasies about the little fairies or angels or whatever who fly through the world that's inside of her mind. I would much rather have that conversation. It would be much more entertaining than having a conversation with adults about Yang and the prospect of UBI. MPC 162 super chats, $9.99. Thank you very much for that. How do we avoid fake lawsuits for discrimination if we get doxxed? For instance, a plumber gets doxxed, doesn't serve a black family exactly the way they want, and the blacks get the ADL and sue. Let me read that again. How do we avoid fake lawsuits for discrimination if we get doxxed? So in other words, let's say the plumber has served a host of clients, then he gets doxxed, and in those clients there are white and non-white clients, and then he is doxxed as someone who cares about white well-being, and then one of the non-white families sues the plumber and says that they had inferior service when the plumber had fixed their toilet or what have you. Is that what you're saying? How do we? That kind of a lawsuit. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty familiar with law, and that would just prima facie be so spurious, it wouldn't be heard. It would just, to say that, well, 6 months ago, this guy who I found out now, I found out now that he cares about white well-being, and so I'm going to sue him because all along I didn't think he did a very good job fixing my toilet. I If that's exactly what you're asking, if it's not, please tag me with in another question. You don't have to super chat again. And by the way, folks, if you are super chatting, you can do it here on YouTube, or again, you can get in your diver suit or your mining equipment, head down into the description, and you'll find the familiar alternative where Google and YouTube are unable to take their 33%. It is totally up to you. Every single dollar, by the way, for all of you, every single dollar, I don't live on any of the dollars that you super chat, that you invest in me in the cause of white well-being. I don't buy hair care products. I don't buy new pairs of shoes. I don't travel to nice places with a single penny of the money that is invested in me in the cause of white well-being. Every single penny or pence or whatever the smallest unit of currency is where you come from is immediately reinvested in the cause for white well-being. I do not need any money to live or to pay bills. All of that I take care of. I have a job, and that actually, I consider my job my avocation. This is my vocation, my passion, and that is serving white well-being. So everything that you give goes right into the cause, and it goes into the cause in a way that I hope you can tell by now is more than I guess is guided more than just the average sort of insight. Is guided by a little bit more intelligence than what you will find in other places. I mean, surely your money could be wasted by some content producers on the cause for white well-being. I am not the kind of person that has wasted money. I'm the kind of person who has pulled businesses out of the red. So I know how to make things work. Juan writes, super chatting $5. I'm heartbroken all the time. Thanks for cheering me up. Well, God bless you, brother. Thanks for radiating that positive energy back at us. We all are going to go from these conversations, from our own efforts to go free out into our community. And it's this positive energy. It is this vibe that we live that is going to bring people to us. It's this winning that we do that's going to bring people to us. There is a great many more things that are in the works that are going to be victories for us this year. We are not going to be like the rest of the white positive sphere. We are not going to be more complaints about the status quo. We are not going to be more flaccid prescriptions about how to move forward. We are going to be the energy and the force and the might and the genius and beauty that takes us to the next level, the victories that take us to the next level, the party that everyone wants to be at. That is what and who we are. That is how we're going to grow and continue growing. We have poured in super chatting $5. Thank you very much. Where's that poor Dan? Whites in the Yang Gang are begging an Asian man for scraps. Not exactly inspiring. Exactly. How pathetic does that look? To sidle up at the table where the Asian man is sitting and beg for a little bit of food tossed over the side. How pathetic is that? That is not a man. That is not a Promethean man. That is not a Promethean woman. That is not a member of Western kind that we would beg, that we would hope we would support, we would throw in with the non-white who promises to do a little bit for us. That's not what we do. We stand on our own 2 feet and we make our history happen. We make our victories happen. That's how we win. So let's see what else we have up here. Small white businesses, back to NPC 162. Small white family businesses get targeted all the time. Have to keep up with regulations. Only big companies can afford. Exactly, that's true. I'm concerned about legal cost of doxed allies. Yes. Okay. Well, one of the big problems, of course, of the when you have this crony capitalism, are these runaway companies. They have all the money in the world, and they want to reduce competition. So what they do is they use their money to finagle out of politicians more and more of these regulations, which they make sound good to the public. They say it's going to be good because the regulations are going to benefit all of you. It's going to protect you. And then what ends up happening, though, the intent is to prevent competitors from entering the market. So small family businesses end up being unable to compete because they don't have the financial resources to keep up with the companies who do have the financial resources to abide by the regulations that they paid for by way of the politicians that they bought to get those regulations implemented. That's how that works. So how do you handle that? How do we deal with it? When I'm not quite sure how being doxxed plays into it. Being doxxed, I think, plays into it more in the sense of you run the chance, once you're doxxed, I guess, of losing business, of your anti-white competitors promulgating the fact that you care about white well-being to your potential clients. The important thing, obviously, is to prepare yourself. And this is something I was saying, pardon me, on Josh's stream, is that this idea that you're going to look to the federal government of the United States for help as a white person. Seriously, you're going to look to the federal government of the United States to support you with a $1,000 check every month. They're going to just sweep in and take care of you. Never. Never. They have not cared about us in any of our lives. Not a single white person alive today has lived under a United States government or under any other Western government, for that matter, that cared about white people. So no government in the West is going to take care of you. So the other night when I was with Josh, I said, we have to take care of ourselves and each other. And then, so what some of the people in the chat, some of the trolls in the chats, oh, well, this guy's just giving the old pull yourself up by your bootstrap argument or something. That's nonsense. They were the ones who were being hyper individualists. And I'll tell you why. Because they wanted that $1,000 so bad, even though I had already said and made the point crystal clear, as I did the very first time this came up on Tutar weeks ago and on this stream, that the most dangerous element about UBI is that it would seal the mouths of white people relative to our well-being, because they would give it to you and it would be a year or two, and then they would say, if you say anything that isn't anti-white, if you trouble anti-whiteism at all, then we're just going to take that $1,000 away from you. Already we have white people that are terrified of speaking out for white well-being. How much more silent will they be if they also run the risk of losing $1,000 every month? So these people who were accusing me erroneously of being for individualism, of telling people, oh, just take care of yourself, they were the ones who were being the hyper individualists, because what they were saying is their own selfish needs mattered more to them than our people. They don't care. They don't give a damn what happens to the white children out there. They don't give a damn what happens to you. As long as they can get their $1,000 a month, you can just go right to hell, is what these people are saying. So they were the ones who were being selfish. They were the ones who were being inconsiderate. So what I say to you now, when it comes to our businesses, when it comes to our small businesses, when it comes to our people who, wherever they are, our lawyer folks, I have people, I've got ditch diggers. I just had another doctor write me today, lawyers, police officers, people who claim to be from other branches of law enforcement that I won't say. I've got people from all walks of life, accountants. I have people who effectively are janitors writing me, who are coming to white well-being, and they are now taking up the same slogans, the same ideas, that we need to take care of each other. Part of taking care of each other is being strong ourselves. We cannot care for our brothers and sisters if we are in a weak, dependent state, for God's sake. If you're in a state that you need to rely on manna raining from heaven, you're not going to be able to help your brothers and sisters in our community. You need to make yourselves strong. That's a reality. That has nothing to do with, it's the old pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. That's a reality. We need to make ourselves as hardened and as strong as we can be financially, where we get our food, where we get all of the things we need to survive. We need to make ourselves into our own fortresses. And then we absolutely, or simultaneously, have to be able to reach out to our brothers and sisters, just like we did in much more sort of antediluvian times, when we lived in the harsh environment of Europe, and we developed these abilities to empathize and sympathize with people we didn't even know, our fellow white brothers and sisters, who, when we came upon each other, we had to rely on each other to survive that environment. That instinct exists in us because of those environments. That is how we have to live again. Those of us who are serving white well-being, we need to realize that our well-being as individuals is only achievable by way of our people's well-being. So we are going to have to turn to each other, strengthen ourselves. We are going to have to, during those few good months in Europe in antediluvian times, during those few good months when we had to collect meat, to collect all of the different foods, seeds, etc., that we could, we did everything we could to survive that winter. But we were also open to the less fortunate. And that's like today we talk about the difference between deserving poor and undeserving poor. If your stock of food was somehow maybe washed away by a flood in the middle of winter, you would die if it wasn't for our white brothers and sisters who, realizing that you were deserving poor at that point, took you in. And then, of course, you the next year would repay the favor, or your children would save their children from a similar fate. That is how we have to behave toward each other. That is how we have to think about each other. So when it comes to the lawsuits, it can be a complicated matter. We can talk about it again. MPC, I think you were called. We can talk about it again. We can do a specific show on it. And in fact, we can bring on, I have some attorneys in the cause who are, some of them are open, some of them are still, riding under the radar, and we can talk with them about that sort of thing. I think it would be really valuable, and I thank you for bringing it up. Looks like Roy Danton has shown up after jumping in his diving gear, and I think I hope he didn't come up too soon and too quickly and ends up in the, what is that called again? It's the chamber, the hyperbaric chamber, because so that he doesn't get the bends. Roy Danton super chatting with $50. Thank you so much for that, Roy. Writing, let's see if I can read that from here. Before I moved to the US, I lived on one of those Marxist neighborhoods in Germany where you had to be afraid of even getting mail from the wrong people for Antifa attacks, as well as repercussions from the system, i.e. healthcare. That's the UBI danger, precisely. Absolutely beautifully written, Roy. That is exactly it. The moment they start distributing something like that, you wouldn't be able to say a word for white well-being and not have it taken away. So everything you're doing here now, you think it would just be me? You think it would just be me? That the anti-whites would deprive of the UBI payment because I'm here in front of you speaking about white well-being? It wouldn't just be me. You listening would be all it would take for you to lose your $1,000. That's all it would take. Hearing what I had to say, willing to come here and show up. That's all it would take, and you would lose your $1,000. So UBI would be what? It would be the end of freedom of speech. Daughter of Albion, a lovely young woman. Thank you very much for the super chat of £10. UBI will further dispossess whites of their honor and dignity. Absolutely. A very profound point. Men will become subject to the dictate and whims of their welfare supervisors. It will make you feeble and dependent. Absolutely. Is that supposed to be, is that Latin, the end? I won't mispronounce it. But yes, I absolutely will not endorse UBI if for no other reason on planet Earth. I am a man. I'm a man of the West. And as I said to Albion on another day, I will be able to go before my ancestors with my head held high for my acts in this world, for my deeds, irrespective of any talent or lack of talent, irrespective for anything that I was born with or came into. I will be able to stand before my ancestors with my head held high for the acts that I engaged in, that I took while I was alive. Will you? I also said in that conversation that whatever the ancestors, whatever they be, I mean, if it's me in a spirit form and them in a spirit form, or it's just my own conscience, as I slip away into eternity, my head will be held high. Will yours? And you will know it. You will be known by your deeds, my friends. Okay. Let's see what we have here. We're talking about UBI, just a couple of funny facts. Government gets its money from 3 places. Does anybody know where that gets its money from? Where does government get its money from? There are 3 places. Silly Sad says UBI means that it cannot be taken away. Really? Do you have the power to not take it away? Seriously, in our context, if it's written down somewhere, I mean, this is sort of the fantasy of the proprietarians, that you could write something and it's permanent. No man could ever disobey it because, as we know, everything that's ever been written has been obeyed to a T, right? Isn't that the way it works? Everything that's ever been written by man has been obeyed to the letter. I'm afraid not. UBI could be given and taken away and would be given and taken away whenever the anti-whites who control the system would deem it so. To put faith in a written document, even if you chisel it in stone, is to be making a very dangerous error, my friend. Michael says we are all cogs in the machine. We have to become gremlins then. If we're cogs in their machine, we have to become gremlins. Sierra, super chatting with 10 pounds, writes, Facebook said today that they wouldn't permit any endorsement of white separatism. Jason is right. They won't even allow us to advocate for our own physical escape from diversity. Isn't that remarkable? The noose tightens on all of our throats. But of course, it's going to tighten as the anti-whites get increasingly desperate. It's going to get worse as the anti-whites get increasingly desperate, but that's okay. Because that means that we are getting closer to our Western sunrise. That means we're getting closer to recapturing our destiny. We have white men, white women, white men. That's where the money comes from. Pretty much. That's where it comes from. That's true. Technically, the bank gets its, or the government gets its money from printing it. It gets its money from borrowing it, and it gets its money from taxing it. So ultimately, from all of us. Silly writes, if you can take what UBI away, then you can take away any amendment to the Constitution. They have been redefined and subjectively applied to different groups of people. That already has been done, my friend. It's being done today. It's regularly done. I can't believe that you would honestly think that if we write it down on a piece of paper, that somehow will stop the anti-whites from doing whatever they want to do. When has a piece of paper ever enforced itself? I mean, this is the problem with this is how the white man's brain works. Is we like order. We like to believe that there could be some sort of like set of rules, and we are all going to bind ourselves by the rules. But this is not how the jungle works. This is how it works in our heads, and then we recreate what's in our heads, in our hearts, and we build these big, beautiful Western cities and law and order, etc. As long as it's just us. But when it's not just us, it doesn't function like that at all. And we have many years now of evidence that it works very differently than that in the real world. I mean, what you write down on paper, I mean, the reality is, I could take, for example, I could take the laws in Saudi Arabia, and if you put me in absolute charge of Saudi Arabia, I could reinterpret those laws, every single one of them, no matter how clear they are. I could reinterpret them to mean the exact opposite of what they mean and effectuate every single thing I wanted to effectuate in Saudi Arabia. If you don't realize that, then just trust that it can be done. It is being done. I could do it, and others can do it. So if it doesn't appear clear to you, calculus doesn't appear clear to everyone. All right. Quantum physics is not clear to everyone. Just understand that it doesn't have to be clear to you how it's done for it to be done. You can see that it's being done. So money, the government gets the money from taxing, printing, and borrowing. Where would the money come from for UBI? Well, it doesn't really make sense to tax it, right? Because if they were going to tax it, then you, as a white man or white woman, you would have to pay for your own $1,000 in your taxes, right? But you would also have to pay for the bureaucracy that would process and then redistribute your money. So let's just say that came out to $500 a month. So you would be taxed $1,500 a month to get your $1,000 back. Does that make much sense? But it gets worse because you already bear the burden of paying for the taxes for the rest of the welfare recipients. So you would also have to pay for the majority of the non-white population. So to get your $1,000, maybe it would be $2,000 in taxes a month, maybe $2,500 in taxes a month to get your $1,000 a month. How smart does that sound? So the other way, of course, is to have the government print it. And then I'll talk about the point that Josh raised about Alaska and natural resources. The other way is to print it. So let's say we print it for January. We're going to print the first January payment to everyone in America, the $1,000. We're going to say a conservative number for the number of Americans in the country, the countable number. We're going to say 327 million people. They're more than that, but we'll just use a conservative number because the conservative number destroys the argument for UBI. You take 327 million, you multiply that by 1,000, you end up with $27 billion, $200 million. $27 billion, $200 million for the month of January. That is almost half the Department of Defense budget for the entire year. That is almost the entire defense budget, half of the entire defense budget for the entire year. So what are we going to do for February? Are we going to print some more money, or are we going to tax now that the money's out there? Now we're going to tax you. Now you'll pay $2,500 a month in taxes to get your $1,000 a month. What's it going to be? If we decide to print for every month, if we printed for every month, we take that $327 billion, 200 million, and we multiply that by 12 for 12 months, and we come out to the fund number of $3,926,400 million. The banker bailout that everybody said was so egregious that it was just ineffable. We couldn't even talk about how egregious it was only $700 billion. $700 billion was massive. And now we're talking about $3,926,400 million. The difference between 1,000,000 seconds and 1,000,000,000 seconds is 3 days to 30-some years. What do you think the difference is between 1,000,000,000 seconds and 1,000,000,000,000 seconds? These numbers get well beyond the ability of mortal man to comprehend. So it is a staggering sum. Some people might say that, well, we wouldn't have had inflation. In fact, I think Greg says in a conversation that printing all of this money won't cause inflation because we printed that banker bailout money and didn't cause inflation. Well, of course, that banker bailout sum was a lot smaller than what we're talking about here. But even, let's say, just for argument's sake, that the sum for UBI that we would print would be somewhere less than that 700 billion. That does not mean that it wouldn't cause radical inflation. The banker bailout, it was all done in secret, so none of us know for sure what exactly was sort of stipulation went along with the banker bailout. But what we can conclude, if we are going to be logical and sane and mature adult people, is that the entire sum was riddled with stipulations to prevent inflation. So it was probably different sums were permitted to be freed up and used by the banks at different points in time. So they couldn't just like take all of the money and do whatever they wanted with it. So, and when those sums were freed up, there were probably stipulations about how that money could come or be used in the United States. So it probably stipulated something like commodities had to be purchased abroad or products purchased abroad, and then those commodities or products brought back into the United States as value. Or building supplies that then could be used or sold to it. So it was stipulated in such a way that we wouldn't have massive inflation as a consequence. If the money is created and dispersed to the population is totally different than these banking entities, which I don't support. But I don't know if I'll have to say that because there'll be some troglodyte out there that's going to say that Jason is supporting the bankers or something like this because he says that it's a different scenario to give them a bunch of money and not the people a bunch of money. It just frankly is a different situation by way of how that money reaches into the economy. If you spill the money out into the population is effectively a container. If you imagine each body attached is, you can sort of look at it as a metaphor, as like this container. And the currency is what you pour into this container. If you're going to pour a lot more currency into that container and not have inflation, not have the money spill over the sides, what do you have to do? Does anybody know? There's something that you can do to prevent inflation. If you radically increase, and it happens to be what Yang is for, ladies and gentlemen. It happens to be exactly what this guy is for. He's exactly for doing this. What can a country do if they're going to radically increase the money supply to prevent inflation from occurring? Who knows? Let me look at some super chats. Poor Dan super chatting with $5. And it just disappeared. So let me see if I can find it. Anti-whites want to make it illegal to publicly support whites and make it illegal to boycott our greatest ally on the Eastern Mediterranean. Exactly. They have been doing that in every single state of the country. They've been making that the law of the state, and they're now moving to making it, and it's the momentum, that's the reason why they did it in each state one at a time, to whip up that momentum, to get that movement going, to get that inertia, and then move to the federal level. And they absolutely are moving to make it illegal to boycott Israel in the Middle East. And of course, this idea, and I know you're saying it facetiously, our greatest ally. If Israel was an ally, we would defend them if they were invaded. Italy is an ally. If Italy was invaded, we would go and defend Italy. We would help Italy. But do we go around financially and militarily destroying all of the people that Italy doesn't like? No. So what we have with that valiant little ally is a tail wagging the dog scenario. You have a master-slave relationship. You don't have an ally type of relationship. We have, by way of the alternative method of super chatting, Eat Your Spinach has super chatted with $2. Please read this slowly and dramatically. Okay. Well, let me first find out what you wrote, because I don't want to get into something that might be get me kicked off of YouTube. Let's see. We see the Great Order has tagged me in a comment. I'm absolutely going to read that. I see Lacey Lynn is here. Glad to see you. Listen, everybody, if you haven't tweeted or gabbed this, make sure you do it again. More people are. It's almost 7 on the East Coast. People are getting off work in different parts of the United States and different parts of the world, for that matter, and we want their phones to buzz. We want them to know that going free is out there, that this message is available to them, that they can come into a community that loves. That is what we are. We are a community that loves. We are a community who's going to put an end to the tears that come from white children's eyes. We are a community who's going to put an end to those haunting questions that circle through every white child's mind when they are wondering, am I really from an evil people? Are my people really this despicable? Every one of you had those thoughts go through your mind, whether you remember them or not. I remember them well. Many of you will remember them. That is a horror and something we absolutely cannot permit to happen to our white babies anymore. We are going to put an end to that. We are a community of love. Make sure you tweet Gab, like, click the bell, get on Facebook and Minds and anywhere else. I know that there are more social networking groups popping up. The Great Order writes, it's not like the bankers' wives went out and bought more milk and bread with that money. It was kept within ledgers in those industries. Brilliantly said. Absolutely brilliantly said. All right, let's see here. Okay. I will try, and I've been talking for a while, so I don't know. I'm going to try to read this. Eat your spinach. Thank you very much for that super chat, by the way. Have you super chatted before? I'm not sure that I recognize. I do recognize spinach, but it could have been in somebody else's name. So you say slowly and dramatically. My father died on this floor, right there. Stabbed 27 times, butchered by men he called his friends. Who will tell me that is not murder? Who will tell my legions, who I love, Caesar, as I do, that that is not murder? So that was a cold reading, my friend, but thank you very much for that super chat. I got to do something about the size of that text on that particular platform that I'm not going to name. But if you do want to super chat on that platform, make sure you jump on over to the description and put on your diving gear or your mining gear and go looking. It is down in the description, and you will find it, the familiar alternative. Oh, where were we at? I had asked a question to you all, and did anybody answer that question? Let's see. Let's see what you all are talking about. Intelligent chat in the room. In the Fed. Well, yes, indeed. The Fed is ultimately, there's no conspiracy to understand that those who control the money supply control the country. The Federal Reserve, which is a private institution, prints our money. There's no conspiracy about that. You can go to their website and they will tell you the history of the Fed, when it was founded, and many more of the facts. You don't need to worry about any conspiracy theories. And really, folks, it's not, when these things come to these conspiracy theories, these are just powerful people networking. So it's not really a conspiracy when powerful people network and they do things that serve their self-interests. Really, when it comes down to it, with all of the scandals, sex scandals, bribe scandals, money scandals, pedophilic scandals, all of these sorts of scandals, and somehow of the wealthy, of the powerful, and somehow people believe that the wealthy and powerful can't conspire. How does that jibe? With all of that going on, somehow they're above conspiracy. That only happens with the regular folks. Okay. The other thing, let me just say here that before I forget, that Josh pointed out was if he said, well, there's a way to get the money without printing or without taxing, and that is to socialize the resources of the country. And let me say that when it comes to governance and the economy of the country, I said while I was with Josh, we don't, this is, again, this is worrying about something that we don't have to resolve today. I've shared it when Jared, George, and I have been on streams together. That worrying about what the government is going to look like in the future, or what it could look like, what the economy could or will look like in the future, is like two soldiers in the Alamo arguing vehemently over what the future of economy of Texas is going to look like as Santiago surrounds the fort. So if you don't, not from the United States, you don't know what the Alamo is. It was a fort in Texas. The Mexicans came to fight these people. There was no getting away. There was surrender and be dishonored, or there was fight to the death inside this fort. And those proud men of the West fought to the death. Discussing what the future economy of Texas, or arguing of what it would have been like, would have been absolute asininity. And it is asininity now to fight over what the future economy can look like when we finally control it, or what the future governments can look like when we finally control them. None of that is within. You might as well also argue on what we will do with the sun when we finally have the technology to control the sun. What will we do once we finally have that control? I think we should do X with it. You think we should do Y with it. Let's have a big argument over it. And in fact, let's go different ways. I mean, it is that childish. But when it comes to, and this is something that I think, especially those who have been wooed by serenaded by this proprietarian idea, and I get it, I understand. You want to believe that there's going to be this easy way, you're just going to write some words on a paper and it's all going to turn out well for all time. I get how that is alluring, but it's just for children. I mean, you don't believe in fairies anymore, right? You don't believe in Santa Claus anymore, presumably. So don't believe in these silly stories. The human animal has demonstrated itself throughout all of history to be a cyclical animal. We hear people talk about how history is cyclical, or the movements of nations or something is cyclical. Folks, those things are cyclical because we are cyclical beings. So what we need, and nobody, where have any great philosophers talked about that? I mean, that's something we have to accept. We are cyclical beings. So what we can or should be able to agree on right now is that our governance in the future has to be malleable. Our economies have to be malleable. They have to be able to change with the seasons of Western kind in order to continue to serve our well-being. That is what has to be done. Now, what that looks like, we don't have to know yet, because you know why? We are going to build the foundation of this edifice. And those technologies and that intelligence will come when it's called upon, when its time is right. And those people at that time will develop the economies and the structures and the network and the governments and et cetera that we need. We are going to set the edifice so that it always serves white well-being. They will figure out the engineering of how to make it happen once you get to that point. NPC 162 super chatting with $4.99. What are your thoughts on gays? You mean just happy people in general? Should they try to have a wife? Are some less gay than others? The conservative gays I know are scared of pro-whites. Really? Well, we have homosexuals in the white positive sphere. I don't think that they should force themselves or what have you, because this is all about what they would do to have a wife. That would be something that I presumably would be pretty objectionable to them, probably as objectionable as it would be for heterosexuals to have to have a mate of the same sex. So if they want to support white well-being, they're welcome to support white well-being. We, of course, it doesn't serve white well-being to have homosexual men and homosexuals in the white positive sphere. I have never spoken to one that has thought otherwise. Have all objected to homosexual men parading down the streets with giant sex toys. I mean, that's obviously not going to be good for our community. And so obviously something like that, when it comes to homosexuality, we have, as a people, an ideal, and we all strive for that ideal. It is the perfect white man and the perfect white woman. And the perfect white man and the perfect white woman have a collection of traits. They are a very specific type of people, and they come together in a perfect union, and they make a perfect family. This is our ideal. And the reason why that is our ideal is because the perfect family, the perfect husband and perfect wife and perfect children are the basis for the perfect community. And then the basis for the perfect state, the perfect nation, the perfect ideology that serves white well-being. So we set this up as our ideal, and then we all strive to achieve that ideal. And the reality is we are all going to fall short. So we're going to fall short in any number of ways. So homosexuality is one of the ways that we fall short. But there are many ways that we fall short of the ideal. And so we have to allow for our brothers and sisters to be human, to have foibles, to be fallible, to fail. As long as we continue to have that objective and are moving in the right direction, that's what matters. Moving in that right direction also prevents movements in other directions that lead to things like giant parades of nude men with giant sex toys parading in front of children and other things that clearly, to sane and healthy people, understand that it is damaging, that it is deleterious, just as it would be deleterious if you had heterosexual men and women parading through the streets with giant sex toys in front of children. That too will be deleterious. So we have a goal, we have an ideal, and then we also have the room for all of us to fall short of that ideal, because we all will. I will, you will, we all will. It's about trying. It's about moving in the right direction. It's about being understanding of our failings, our personal failings, but also the failings of our brothers and sisters. And as I said earlier, helping each other to move forward, helping each other to make it. So when it comes to making use of the natural resources, as Josh pointed out with Alaska and this like dividend that they're paying there, this always starts out good. You don't need, I mean, you can listen to me now, but you please go do your own research about how this begins and then where it goes. Always. At least under this current context. Don't come back with but we could do something completely different and then it would work. Probably so. Probably so. We could probably come up with a way to use natural resources in such a way that you don't end up with individuals owning all of the diamond mines, and then they somehow become trillionaires because of it, and the rest of us are paupers. I am firmly against any sort of economic system or any sort of governmental system that effectively makes mortal gods out of human beings relative to the rest of us. And if you have an individual who has billions of dollars or even hundreds of millions of dollars or what have you, they are effectively a god compared to the rest of us. They don't have a single vote like we do. They have the ability to move millions of votes with their wealth. That is not commensurate in any way, shape, or form. So I'm absolutely object to that sort of system. So it may well be, and Lord willing, there will be white men and women who will come forward and find a way to construct a government and an economy so that we can use the natural resources to the enrichment of us all. But right now, it doesn't exist. Right now, all you can do is pilfer the treasury, the natural resources of a country. And when you begin the process, it works. When you begin the process, you take out so much money and then you disperse it. Everybody gets a little bit, everybody gets happy. But what inevitably happens in this universe that we're in now is that each successive set of politicians promises more from the government treasury, from the natural resource revenue. And who gets voted for then? Is it going to be for the guy who says, no, 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 no. In fact, we have to take a little less because of the market here and there. So you're going to have a little bit less in your wallets, because 50 years from now, our country is going to be in bad shape if we continue to take the same amount. Are the people going to vote for him? Or are they going to vote for the politician who's going to say, I'm going to double your dividends from the natural resources. I think it'll be fine. Everybody, of course, is going to vote for the politician that is going to take more from the public resources. And then eventually you end up with Venezuela. You go from the crony capitalism of dog eat dog to the crony socialism of every citizen eats cats, of every citizen breaks into the zoo to kill the zoo animals to get something to eat. That is what you go to. So that's what happens when you raid the natural resources in this context. And again, in the future, somebody might be able to do it better than we're doing it now. But it's important to appreciate our reality for what it is. Of course, Yang was talking about some sort of a increasing immigration. Oh, that was what I was asking you earlier. I asked you all, how do you prevent inflation? Because this is really exceptionally important. How do you prevent inflation when you create a bunch of money that you then disperse to the population? As I said, I use the metaphor of the population as a container composed of the bodies of the people that make up the society. The only way that you prevent inflation when you disperse a bunch of money into an excess of money, if you will, into that population, is to radically increase immigration. I hope that lands heavily in your ears, because Yang, in fact, says, I want to have this UBI. He knows it would cause radical inflation. And so the only way to prevent it is, he says, I'm for massive immigration. I'm for throwing the doors wide open. Now, he says, of course, as every lying Democrat does, that, oh, well, there'll be this waiting period to become a citizen of so many years in the country. But you know damn well and good that, as I said on Josh's show, the Democrats would immediately just name the category of those who are waiting to become citizens. They'll just name them like exploited worker or something like that, exploited workers. And then they'll make arguments that are very legitimate and cogent about taxation without representation, because surely you'll be taking taxes from these people's paychecks, and they won't be able to be represented if they can't vote. And then the Democrats will just go right back to the books, and they'll just take out the pen, and they'll just say, well, we're just going to amend this a little bit, and we're going to say, yes, they can vote. That your whole life, that's what's been happening. How many more of your life, how many more years of your life does that have to happen before you finally say, oh yeah, I'm not going to fall for that one again? So let's move forward so we can get through this material and move on. Let's see what anybody else is saying out there in the chat. Why would it prevent inflation? The reason why radically increasing the population would prevent inflation is because you have that many more individual units who need and are using the currency. You could also increase inflation or cause inflation by keeping the same money level, but decreasing your population. So if you radically decrease your population and maintain your money supply, you cause inflation as well, unless the money is leaving. So by increasing the number of units, and in this case, the unit is a living person. By increasing the number of units, you increase the number of individuals that are using the dollars that are available in the economy. And by that use, you prevent inflation. Each of them will need money for food. Each of them will need money. So the overall number, for example, the overall number of grocery stores will have to go up. The overall number, all of that will have to increase to serve. So you see, if all of that increases, but you don't increase the money supply, you see how you would have a massive deflationary environment if that were to happen. That's how that works. AL writes, how likely do you think it is that Andrew has a real shot at the presidency? Andrew Yang, he's not even going to get the nomination for the Democrat Party. He won't. There's not a chance in hell. I don't know the entire field that they have of candidates. I haven't looked into it closely enough. But my gut guess at the moment of what would be best for the Democrats to run in this next election cycle would be a white man with a non-white female, or two females, a non-white and a white female. Those would be the strongest horses for their party, and then they can just fill in the personalities, whoever those might be. But right now, that would be from the lay of the land as I see it right now. Those would be the strongest horses for their party. So we have Liberty Warrior writes that you need a government to force white pride. If people are proud whites, then they will freely favor trade with their own. Voting is not the solution. Voting is not the solution. And we're going to be talking about that as well. We have a false dichotomy here. And I hope that people are getting this, and we really need this message to get out there. There isn't just like there was a false dichotomy between, or I could just frame this all into one argument. There is no false dichotomy between like the system as it is and some new system. We can't work within the system because it's totally rigged against us. They have all of the money, and in a land, in a universe where cash or currency is exchanged for goods and services, the creators of the currency are gods. Everyone else is much less. And we can't work outside of the system in some sort of extra system type of way, whether that be civil war or something of this nature. That won't work either. Those are false dichotomies. And I've argued before outside in other spheres outside of the white positive sphere about we probably have this need for everything to be situated in a dichotomy because we have two hemispheres of our brain. So everything probably has to be black, white, up, down, right, left, because of the actual physical makeup of our brain. So even when we have multiple choices and you choose one, you then find yourself understanding your choice as your choice against all of those. So there's just some way that we're not capable of seeing more choices than that. We can have the one, and then all of the others are in a single group at that point. So these are false dichotomies. So it's easy to fall into that because it's a natural thing to think that, okay, well, it's got to be, you got to vote your way out of this, or it's got to be some sort of extra system type of activity that'll do it. It's neither. It is, as I've said, and I'll keep saying, it is a psychological cultural approach, spreading a curative contagion to the system's brainwashing, to the meme pathogens. That is the route to success. And it might seem strange right now. It might feel odd. It might even seem to you unlikely. But I guarantee you, once we have success, everyone will be able to look back and say, that was the way it had to work. That was the only way it was going to work, and that was the way it worked. So now it makes perfect sense. I promise you that. Why do I know that? Because I have seen that on a micro scale again and again and again when it comes to this curative contagion. I've seen individual after individual be fearful about applying these dialectics, fearful about really coming to own these things and use this lexicon, finally give themselves over to it, and their world changes. So those are microcosms of the macrocosm that is our civilization, that are our societies. As I've seen it there, and then they say, just as I said a moment ago, they say, well, looking back now, that was obviously the way it had to work. That was really the only way I was going to change my family members' minds. And keep in mind, though, there are going to be anti-whites out there that are not going to be persuaded because they are so sick. When you meet them, move past them and move on to someone who can hear the message. There are millions and millions of middle class and wealthy and poor whites who are able to hear this message and will be healed once you share it with them. Yang, of course, is against the right to self-defense. I don't know how many people have been talking about that. saying that well, Yang's against the right to self-defense, and we have the Democrats are already against the right to self-defense, and they're going to be against the right to self-defense in the future. So we might as well have Yang in office and have $1,000 a month, and have him be against the right to self-defense as well. Is like you're bleeding out and saying, go ahead and open another vein as long as you give me a cup of orange juice. I mean, I'm already bleeding. So if you just go ahead and open another artery and let me have my cup of orange juice. Not the wisest decision. I've talked about how Yang is not going to be able to talk about white well-being or about things harming our community because he's non-white. This is the error made by conservatives. If he were to continue talking, let's say he got the nomination. He's not going to. But let's say he got the nomination. He would not be able to continue talking about the opioid epidemic in the white community because they would just call him a Nazi for talking about it. They would say, why are you picking white people out of all of those poor souls who are suffering from drugs, particularly the non-whites who suffer not only with drugs, but with all of this evil white society around them? You should be focused more on them. And he would never mention it again. And you know that's the case, folks. You don't need me to tell you that. Let's talk about automation, because there's a lot of incorrect ideas out there about automation. Let's see what else anybody had to say. Elaine Sabatino, she writes, sick is right, no white guilt, sad but true. Absolutely. Let me see. Laurel, Joe Biden will run with Stacey Abrams. I know who Abrams is only like I have just a vague picture. Is she like a light-skinned black woman? Lacey Lynn writes, thank you for pointing out the false dichotomy. Makes sense. I've been struggling with this recently. It is a false dichotomy, folks, but you can be forgiven for it. It's something that seems absolutely natural. We look at all things in this in this way. We dichotomize all things. It's a bizarre phenomenon, and I have no doubt that it limits our understanding of the universe, especially when it comes to physics. Okay, I answered that question. Anybody have any specific things for me at the moment as I move into automation? What are some thoughts on automation? We know a lot of people are talking about automation by 2030, some outrageous number of people are going to be out of work because Abrams is not light. Okay, she must be a dark-skinned, non-white woman. Thank you for that, Laurel. She's not, or is she not light in the sense of being bright? Let me see. Rick, super chatting with $5. Thank you very much for that. I bought Born Guilty today. Better late than never. No Yang bucks required. Amen to that. Well stated. Thank you for your work, bro. You are most welcome. Prepared to be empowered and entertained as you work your way through Born Guilty. And feel free to reach out to me with questions and comments by way of my website as you work through it. And be aware that there is a unique device in the book that requires you to physically hold it. When you come to that device, it is not an error. Stay calm, reflect on the context of where you are in the story, and follow the alphabet. Those are the hints that I will give to the riddle, and you will no doubt find your way through the conundrum. No yang, no yin yang. Yes. Are we seeing, folks, are we seeing fewer people who are drinking the yang tang? Or is this getting worse? Do you see more people jumping up and hopping up on the yang wang? Lacey Lynn, super chatting with $5. Thank you very much. Please talk about the argument that UBI will allow more women to stay at home. It's been a thorny argument in my side that people keep bringing up. Gladly. In fact, I will talk about it relative to inflation and how this works, because this is something that the economy is extremely difficult to understand, and people are really having a hard time getting it. And so I will help you. I will put it in some very simple terms for everyone. This is what you can take to all of the different chats when people are making the mistakes that we see repeated over and over. When you inject money into the economy, if we could give everybody $1,000, what would happen? $1,000 every month. Demand would go up. So for the family that Lacey's talking about, you have the husband, maybe, and wife are both working, and this supposedly is going to allow women to stay home with their families rather than have to work. What happens as soon as we give everybody an extra $1,000? Demand for goods and services goes up. What happens? What does the TV, the company who produces TVs, what do they do when suddenly more of their TVs are being bought? What do they have to do when more of their TVs are being bought than they were being bought the previous months? They have to produce more TVs. Why do they have to produce more TVs? Because if they don't produce more TVs, then it'll be their competitors' televisions that are being sold, right? They need their TVs to be on the shelves so that you are buying their TVs with your extra $1,000 a month. So that means they have to produce more TVs. To produce more TVs, what do they have to do? They have to hire more labor. They have to buy more of the raw materials to produce TVs. What does that do for their cost of running business? That drives up their cost of doing business. They have to pay for more labor and they have to pay for more materials. What do they then do with that cost? What is always done? What always happens when taxes are raised on big businesses? They pass it along to you in the form of an increased price. So when you begin putting $1,000 into everybody's pockets, demand for goods and services goes up. To meet that demand, so as to stay ahead of their competitors, businesses have to produce more of their goods and services. The old price is not going to be enough to sustain the new business model, so they have to raise their price on their products. Once they raise their price on their products, what does that do to the value of the $1,000 that's in your pocket? It lowers the value of your $1,000 because now the TV that used to cost X now costs X plus N. Now you have to pay more for those TVs. The value of that $1,000 has shrunk. So the wife can't quit working and go home because in very short order, the market will respond to the increased money supply by increasing prices. That is how inflation works. And it could be very deleterious relative to other currencies around the world. It could make the purchasing power, it could really screw things up. So you are not going to be able to stop working as a woman and go home because of this extra $1,000, because now bread will cost more, milk will cost more, rent will cost more, gas will cost more, your new car will cost more, everything will cost more. And eventually, that $1,000 is reduced to a necessity rather than a luxury. Does that make sense to everybody? Eventually, that $1,000, which was a boon, is reduced to a necessity, not a luxury. So this idea that artists or what have you will be able to just live on UBI and produce great works of art is something that would be short-lived. When the homeless people started receiving their $1,000, they would look for places to live. What would that do to the number of places to live? It would reduce the availability of places to live. Rent and sales. Price would go up on rent, and there would be a seller's market, a ballooning seller's market. Everybody who lived in those lower income places would want to move out of them to nicer places. So what would that do to the next level of housing, renting and purchasing? Same thing. Eventually, you would need that $1,000 just to get by. It would not take long either. The purchasing power, it would hit certain products and services first, others would lag. I mean, obviously, I'm sure bling for cell phones would go through the roof once the non-whites started getting hold of $1,000 extra a month. But That would, you'd probably see the bling go up 500% overnight. But the other things would eventually catch up, negating the benefit of the $1,000. I hope that makes sense. I don't see anybody saying that it doesn't. AL says he's against automation and receiving the handouts. AL also writes, man is given by nature a gift, and that gift is the privilege of labor. Through labor, we learn all things. A person's moral character is developed by working for his luxuries. Amen to that. Very well said. Thank you for including that in the chat. Joshua Randall's super chatting by way of the familiar alternative. Thank you, good sir. $20 investment. Thank you. I was on the Yang Gang for about a day, mostly out of nihilism. Exactly. That's a reason why everybody went, brother. Nothing to be ashamed of. It's hard not to get overly blackpilled, but you snapped me out of it very fast. Kuna Clan 2020 all the way. Well, thank you. One of these days I might run for office, and I would be very happy to have you all support that effort, and we will make one hell of a lot of noise. Odds that there would be an actual me in office are about as likely as the sun blowing up and us all being able to cook our hamburgers and hot dogs for free that day. We have Juan writes, no white guilt. The welfare state is a de facto UBI, and Section 8 has inflated the already ridiculous cost of housing in San Diego. You are dead right. Thank you, good sir. Thank you. That is exactly what is happening with the welfare state already. That is exactly, for God's sake, that is why universities cost so much to go to. I mean, the reality of this is all around us. As soon as the government began backing up the student loans, what happened to the price of attending a university? It went through the stratosphere because all of the universities knew that they were going to get whatever price each year it would increase. And like I said to Josh Neal, that if we were to say, let's say it was just a year. Let's say you gave out $1,000, and then by the end of the year, that 1,000 is negated by the market's response. And so next year you would give out 2,000 a month. The business people would just anticipate the next infusion of money, the next increase, and they would have to elevate their price and their number of their products and services relative to their competitors to stay in business. So it would very quickly, in short order, there wouldn't be any amount of money that they could give you that would be a boon on top of what you would need to survive, on what you would need for bread or what you would need for milk, etc. There is no panacea anywhere. There never will be. Pamela super chatting with $5. My widow's pension is a $1,000. Not a lot of money. No, and think about it. You are there. There are so few people to get the $1,000 in those scenarios that it doesn't affect the market in any way, and you're able to do very little with that. So very important point. Thank you for saying that. Jameson Wade, you've got my vote, brother. Thank you very much for that. White is beautiful, Ryan. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Michael says, Chicago is Planet of the Apes. It's certainly out of control, isn't it? Shauna saying to someone, immigration is a mess. Let's keep rolling, folks. MPC 162 Super Chats $4.99. Should we vote for Patrick Little in 2020 Republican primary? Not asking for an endorsement, but I want to vote for a pro-white. Maybe I write you in. Brother, when it comes to voting, and I guess we'll talk about voting really quick. Michael writes, I should have lots of children. That would be a splendid thing to have happen, good sir. Brian would vote for me. Thank you very much. When it comes to voting, this is what I want you to do. I want you to think for a moment about all of the effort that you put in, if you did, or folks you know who put an effort to help Trump get elected. How many people you spoke to? Did you make robocalls? Did you give money? Did you attend rallies? Did you pass out leaflets? What did you do? Did you put signs up in your yard? Did you put signs up on the highways? A great many millions of us participated. Did you write memes? Did you yell at people in arguments on Twitter and on Facebook and other message boards? What did you do to help get Trump elected? What if, rather than invest all of that time, money, and energy into getting Trump elected, somebody who has largely demonstrated that he's not going to be able to uh, achieve anything that he had promised in any substantive or significant way? What if, instead of all of that time, money, energy, and investment in him, you had put that in the cause of white well-being? How much further would we be along on our way to a context where we really could do something for our people? We would be much further along. So when it comes to voting, I'm going to say this. If you feel you have to vote because your parents and their parents and their parents have always voted, and you feel it's a civic duty or something like this, by all means, head on out. I would say it really doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter if you vote for, I mean, you can make the argument that if Hillary Clinton had won, we would be much more of a cohesive, much more censored, much more bad things would have happened to the country. I think it's probably safe to say, because not because Trump has prevented those things, but because she would have done those things. But I also think it's safe to say we might be much further along on our unity and our coming together and our efforts under a Hillary presidency than under a Trump presidency. It would be driving us together much more severely, sort of like when they use the dogs to round up the cattle. I mean, if you have a bunch of President Hillary dogs, if you go with the metaphor, running around us, barking, hurting us, it's going to push us together. We might be much further along had it been Hillary. I'm not advocating voting for the next Democrat because it really doesn't matter when it comes to white well-being. None of these politicians are going to serve us that can win. So if you want to vote, go vote. If you feel it's a civic duty, go vote. Vote for whoever. If you think you want to vote for somebody who's going to be worse because you think that might be better, vote for them. It doesn't matter. If you think voting for the Republican is going to be better because just maybe, although it won't happen, then go ahead and vote for them. If you want to write in a name, if you want to write in my name, if you want to write in your name, if you want to write in your mother's name, write in anybody. If you feel that it's your duty to go vote, then go vote. But I think you should know by now that there is no one that you're going to vote for who can win, who's going to do anything at all for us. That's a reality that we as mature adults have to accept. Instead, I'm going to ask you to do this. With that energy, with that money, with that time that you would have given to maybe a Republican candidate, put it into the cause of white well-being. That sign you would have put up for the next Republican nominee, make that a sign that says no white guilt. Make that a sign that says it's okay to be white. With that next banner you want to put up on a website, or that website you're going to make, don't make another Trump site. Don't make a Yang site. Make a white well-being site. Use anti-white. Use this lexicon. Put your energy into reaching our people with this curative contagion. And I guarantee you, you will see results that you would not have seen had you invested in a politician. And this is no more hoping, whether it's Yang, whether it's Trump, whether it's anybody else that comes along tomorrow or the day after, no more putting hope in an individual to save us and to recapture our destiny for us. No more putting, if you are an ardent Christian, no more putting your faith in the deity, in God, in Jesus Christ to save us. No more praying, no more getting down on your knees and begging for God to do it. Get up on your feet and make it happen. You're like, if we continue to just hope and put faith in a politician or put faith in God. It's like, I mean, just break it down to anything as simple as you want to imagine, and then you see really how ridiculous it is. Is the shed built in your backyard because of all the effort you put into a politician, or because you asked God for the shed? The shed is built because you got out there and you built it, or you worked your job and earned the money that you could pay to someone else to build the shed. That is how we have to think when it comes to white well-being. No more politicians. I know Josh made a point that there are some people out there, they really just have to put faith in a politician. I got to tell you, no, you don't. You need to be cured of that. Roy Danton, super chatting with $4.99. UBI only works when there's a natural resource that can be consumed for it. But aren't we that natural resource? From the non-whites' point of view, we are their natural resource, and they are absolutely using us. That's a brilliant point, Roy. Thank you for that, for contributing that. We are their natural resource that they are living off of. So absolutely, without question. And again, when it comes to the future, we might as well just go ahead and speculate that we'll be able to figure out a way to develop an economy and a government structure that will be cyclical, that can make use of the natural resources for the enrichment and betterment of us all, that being the labor of our people, the genius of our people, but also the physical natural resources as in terms of oil or coal or what have you. So there will be a way. Now, when it comes to automation, I want to get into this automation because a lot of people are talking about how by 2030, automation is going to put a third of our people out of work. This is incorrect. Automation, every time an advance in technology comes online, it does wipe out a certain number of jobs, but it doesn't mean that a third of the people are going to be put out of work, or X percentage of the people are going to be homeless or without work as a result. So this is a misunderstanding. It's a misattribution to the cause of that, which is another pretty common human error. Every time there is a change, an advancement in technology and automation or what have you comes online, we see the creation of almost as many new jobs as jobs that are being lost. There is a net loss, but it is small relative to the predictions. You can think about when the automobile replaced the horse and buggy. There were a great many jobs that were essentially evaporated in the morning sunlight. All of the people who cared for the horses, the people who bred the horses, the people who stabled the horses, the people who shoed the horses, the veterinarians, the people who built the carriages, the people who built the hardware that went on the carriage, the people that drove the carriages, the people that scheduled the carriages. All of those jobs were gone when the automobile came around. But when the automobile came around, you suddenly had new jobs for mining the ore that was needed to make the parts, etc. And those jobs were created, and the jobs that trained the people to do those jobs, and the tractors and the equipment that had to be created to do those jobs were new jobs that were created. And then the transporting of that ore to factories, where there were new jobs created to smelt the materials, etc., into materials that could then be stamped into parts. Those were jobs, and the training of the jobs there, and then the managing of the jobs there, and then the transportation of that material to plants where those parts, where that material could be made into parts and then assembled into cars, and the jobs of assembling into cars, and the jobs of training the people and working on cars, and the jobs of taking care of the cars, and then the jobs of taking care of the roads, and so many more jobs were created. Now there might have been that was a much more complex scenario. There might have even been more jobs created by that change than lost. But in the coming years, we might well see a situation where we have a net loss. I anticipate a net loss. So what does that mean for us now? That means that the government isn't going to take care of you because you're white. The government is going to go out of its way to not take care of you because you're white. So what do we have to do? First, as individuals, I talked about it earlier in the stream, we have to take care of ourselves. Second, we have to take care of each other. That means if you have a job that is one of those jobs that's on the verge of being automated, it's going to be one of the first ones that's going to be automated. You have to get out there and start getting the training now for the next kind of jobs that are going to be available. That is, I know it's wretched. I know you shouldn't have to do that. But this economy is going to march forward. These anti-whites are going to march forward, whether you like it or not. So there's nothing we can do. You can piss and moan all you want. You can say, "Oh, I don't I want somebody in government that's going to prevent this automation from happening." Well, go howl at the moon. Go tell the wind where to stop. Go tell the ocean's currents where to stop. That's where you'll have more luck than getting the anti-whites to give a damn about what you want. This automation, this technology is going to march forward no matter what you want. So we have to take care of each other. The first thing you have to do is, if you are on the chopping block, you're one of the first industries to go get the training for the next kind of jobs that are going to be available now. If you are a white person who understands what's coming, you know what kind of jobs are going to be available. You know that the anti-whites in government are going to make the training available for free for the non-whites. It's going to be gratis for them at our expense. Remember, there's nothing in this world is free. Somebody's always paying for it. So when we say that the non-whites are getting something free, it's really they're getting something at our expense. So the anti-whites will be providing the training for them free. So if you're one of the white people out there that knows how to code and knows how to write the software and who knows what's coming as far as the automation is concerned, get out there right now while you have the leisure time. Maybe you have a job that's not on the chopping block. Make the training tools available to our people online now and make them free. Do it out of the goodness of your heart. Do it out of the goodness of our people. Develop these tools and make them available to our people who are going to be put out of work by automation in the coming years, so that they too can get this training when and where they need it, and they can get it at a price, zero or very close to it, that they can afford, because there isn't going to be any government handout to us when it comes to the training for the next type of jobs. So that's what I have to say about automation. UBI isn't going to save you from that. And for God's sake, to think for a second that you're going to be put out of work by an advance in technology, and then you're going to turn to the anti-whites in government for help is ludicrous. So how are we doing on the chat? Got a little bit more to cover here, and then we're gonna jump off. So let's see what folks are saying. Any thoughts on automation? Michael says we need chaos before we can have order. Yet to be seen. You never know. Peter says Jason's 100% correct. Thank you very much. Peter writes Christianity is from the desert. All right. Michael writes we need chaos again before we can have order. It may well be the case. We shall see. The thing is now, Michael, and everybody who's thinking about this, we are thinking about whether or not, or what sort of change is necessary for us to recapture our destiny in this context. Remember that. We're thinking about how can we get to our destiny? How can we recapture it in this context? And in this context, it absolutely seems like we're going to need a total government breakdown, a total societal breakdown, and chaos for us to recapture our destiny. But this is not going to be the context in which we recapture our destiny. Now, maybe, I'm not denying, maybe in the future, there'll be a context in which there is societal breakdown, or there must be, for us to recapture our destiny. But we can't forecast that. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know what that next context, or definitely not the one after it, is going to look like. There might be another avenue to recapturing our destiny that is so alien to us right now that we can't even fathom the beginnings of it. So in this environment, chaos almost assuredly would need to be the way, but in another one, there might be a different route. We have Peter says, Jason is a true son of Odin. Thank you for that. It sounds like you honor Odin, so to say that I'm a true son is definitely a compliment. Thank you very much. Let's see, what else do we have here? Does anybody else have any questions about automation or suggestions or ideas? Is anybody confused about anything that I've said so far? I want you all to come away from this conversation empowered and able to obliterate all opposition that stands against you. I want you to come away from every discussion looking like the moral champion, the intellectual champion, the hero of our people. So I want you all to get this for sure. Looks like we have another super chat on the alternative, and I will take 60 seconds and I will be right back. Okay, we have a super chat from Don't Hit Me Daddy. And it reads, I support Yang not because of the neat bucks, but because he wants to regulate social media as a public utility. That's the only thing that matters here. People need to understand that if we can't spread our ideas on the internet, it's game over for us. I completely agree with you that if we cannot spread our ideas, if we are totally silenced, the fight will change dramatically. But it won't end by any means. We will continue to advance the cause of white well-being. It'll be in another form. Rest assured, if they shut me down from the internet, you won't. This won't be the last you see of No White Guilt. I will continue fighting, and you'll see me again in the future. The regulation of social media is to be understood. The statement is to be understood from where Yang is making it. And this goes back to earlier in the stream. Uh, he is making it from the position of needing to gain attention for himself and his campaign. When or if that were to come to fruition, that attention, that objective, that's all that objective is now. It's not a genuine political platform. It's not something that he's genuinely going to try to enact when he gets into office. Why in God's name would any Democrat or would any Democratic Party allow a Democrat to ruin the manipulation and control they have over social media? Do you seriously believe that? I mean, that's like saying the convicted rapist or the convicted child molester, he wants to put an end, or she wants to put an end to child molestation. And so therefore you're going to allow him or her to look after your children. I mean, are you seriously going to entrust your children with that person? Are you seriously going to entrust the Democrats with curtailing the censorship of our voices on social media? And even if, let's say, Don't hit me, daddy. Let's say, by the way, thank you very much for the $2 super chat. Let's say that Yang, it is a genuine sentiment of his. And let's make all of the assumptions that he ends up winning the nomination and he gets into office, and then he's able to somehow overcome the obstacles in his own party, and he's able to overcome the obstacles created by the Republicans, and he's able to overcome the obstacles created by these industries. He's able to overcome all of these insurmountable obstacles to achieve this objective in the Democrat Party of regulating social media. When has regulation worked out well for us? I mean, do you seriously think that there are going to be these government functionaries, almost all of whom are anti-white, these fat, disgusting slobs who hate our people and hate Western civilization? Do you really think they're going to say, well, we need to punish that Twitter over there because they were unfair toward those people who care about white well-being? That's really who you're going to trust with regulation? Come on. You're smarter than that. I know it sounds good, and I know we all want to believe. I mean, this is I worked in the Nerve Center for the conservative movement on the Hill, folks, and I heard day after day after day these people who are otherwise good-minded talk about society, which is really the jungle. This is an illusion we make for ourselves because it's lovely. And we want, essentially, white men want our women and children to live in this illusion. We don't want them to have to live in the real world. And unfortunately, too many white men have become so pathetic and spineless that they now think that this illusion is the real world. They've gotten so far away from it. But the real world is the jungle. All right. It's the viper that stings you in your heel when you are the proud warrior and you die. You know, it is the lion that is 700 pounds and mauls you. That is the jungle. That's the real world. So I was around these people who thought, well, we have this society and we have these laws and we have these norms, and it's kind of like the rules of a game, and everybody has to obey these rules of a game, don't they? And so when we're on the athletic field, whatever game you want to believe, let's say European football, soccer. Let's say you're playing the soccer. Everybody's got to obey these rules, don't they? But then the opposition doesn't obey the rules. What do you do? What is the use of complaining that they're not obeying the rules? What is the use of believing that if we just create a new rule, then they'll have to obey that one? No, the only thing that is going to save us is people like us being in charge of our destiny. Not some new rule, not some new regulating bureaucracy that they're going to control, not something new written on a piece of paper that they're going to interpret and implement. Only us. That is it. Stop looking to the anti-whites to either directly in the way of, well, Yang might feel some sort of sympathy for us, and say, don't look to them for that, and don't look to them to write a law or a rule or a regulation that is somehow that they will allow to just bind their hands, as you and I and the rest of the white population have allowed our norms and our values to bind our hands and prevent us in defending ourselves against our victimizers. They are never going to do that. Stop relying on these things. What else do we have? Ryan WH super chatted $5 by way of the alternative. Thank you for gearing up in the diving gear and heading down into the deep waters of the description to find that familiar alternative. Ragnarok's writing, what is your opinion on the philosophy of non-participation? Take pro-white individuals like Varg on for an example. Is his solution to resist the system unrealistic? As I understand, unless I'm wrong, and you all can correct me, I could be wrong, because I know of Varg, and I think I understand what you mean by that. The question, this non-participation, I've heard this abjure the realm sort of a thing. If that is what you are talking about, this just sort of like in the 60s, what do they call it? Checking out or zoning out or something. If that's what you are suggesting, that's not going to work. If if Varg is suggesting, well, you just go live out on a farm somewhere and have nothing to do with society, that's not going to work. Why is that not going to work? Because they're going to come for you. Is it working in South Africa? They're going to come for you. The only way we are going to recapture our destiny is to spread a curative contagion, what we have here, by going free, by getting as many white people, normal whites with normal sensibilities of whites, to come to our way of thinking, to come to going free, and then to build communities. Some of those communities will be in rural areas. Some of them will be in exurbs. Some of them will be in suburbs, and some of them might even be in cities. Although I recommend them not being there. But we cannot check out of society and kind of just hope that we're going to wait it out, because they will come for you. It will be Camp of the Saints for Varg if we lose. If we lose, if we don't bring this curative contagion to enough of our people across the West, Varg will be, and everyone like him, if this is what he's doing, if I'm misunderstanding him, then somebody please correct me. If this is what he's doing, what the day will come when on the edge of his property there'll be 20 or 30 or 50 non-white males of fighting age, and they will be there to take everything that is his, and there'll be no stopping them. So that's why it won't work. I had the question the other day, do we want to just get back to like some sort of simpler lifestyle? You want to, like stop using cell phones and stop using computers? Absolutely not. We need to be on the cutting edge of every technology. If we today could build a force field over a community that nothing could pass through unless we allowed it to pass through, that somehow magically could allow air to pass, the climate could pass, but none of the military weaponry of the United States and the UK and Germany could come through. If some white person could do that, we will have won. We will have won our salvation, because we would just build that invisible force field out as large as we wanted, to include as many white people as we would allow in and no one else, and it would be over. We need technology. We need to communicate with our brothers and sisters. You cannot set up. I mean, please read. Don't read. Forget about it. Just listen to what I'm saying. It takes too long. But Karl von Clausewitz on war, if you build a castle, it will be overthrown. If you build a fortress, it will be sacked. You need to live in the body of the enemy if you are overwhelmed like we are, if you are disempowered like we are. That is the only way you can survive. You are not going to go set up on some mountaintop or set up on some island or set up on some rural lot somewhere and think that you are somehow inviolable. You're not going to be able to hide under a rock somewhere and think that you won't be found, or think that you won't be able, or that you'll be able to perpetuate who and what we are from underneath that rock. When you are disempowered, as we are disempowered, you need to live in the body of your enemy. That is how you survive. You live in the body of them. You create a people out of this race, which is what we are going to do. And we only need a fraction of this race to become a people for us to recapture our destiny. Know that to be true. We don't need a massive amount of our people, of our race, to become a people. We need a fraction of them to become a people, and then we will recapture our destiny. So, is that Gachi donated $25 by way of the alternative means. Thank you very, very much for that. That's definitely the first time I've seen you. Thank you for mining down into the description to find that familiar alternative. Where are we now on some of these thoughts? Did I misrepresent Varg? Does he actually have a completely different argument? If I misrepresented, then I I rescind my statements relative to him taking those positions. The practicality already happened, or that or okay, here we have somebody writing about Varg. What I'm talking about here, he says that practically already happened to Varg. So why he thinks he's doing something good is totally beyond me. Well, if you're informing me that that's what he thinks that he's going to, the best thing for us to do is to hide out and check out, or whatever they used to say in the 60s. Somebody knows that phrase that the anti-whites taught all of our people in the 60s to get them to hate our civilization. What was that phrase? That check out and whatever, get high. All right, so let's keep rolling then. Did I miss any? If I missed any super chats, will somebody please mention it? I see Marcia says, "Hey, Jason. Hello back. Good to see you here." Who else has shown up? We got other people. Johnny's here. Good to see you, Johnny. More and more people coming to the stream. Hey, folks, let's tweet. We're not done yet. We have just a couple more pages, a little bit more to do. But let's go ahead and tweet and gab the stream, if you will, please. Please click the thumbs up if you have not, and post it to Minds, post it to Facebook if you can, and let's get the message out to as many people as we can. People are getting off work. They're tired. They're angry with themselves. They're angry with their countries. They're angry with their politicians, what they're doing. They don't see a way out. They're lonely. They feel like they've been abandoned. They need a friendly voice. They need this message of healing and love and renewal that we are bringing to them. They need to be part of this rapidly growing community. Make sure you reach out to your circles of influence so that no one like that is suffering. Frost Ford, super chatting with $5. Dropping in to say thanks for everything you're doing for our people. Your positive message is inspiring to us all. Well, thank you most warmly for that. I Frost Forge, I appreciate that deeply. Every time someone gets to me with a message like that, or a message where they've implemented these strategies and is working for them, they're talking about white noir, and that's really what our people are suffering from. That is the verbiage that I have coined for the suffering that we undergo. And this white noir, we talked about it on the last Going Free stream, about how our people end up turning in on themselves and they harm themselves. And there's so many forms that harm takes. And eventually it does take either a slow or rapid suicide. And very often, or not very often, rather, rarely, it becomes something much uglier than self-harm. So they end up harming their friends, harming their family members, maybe harming other communities, still rarer. So let's get in the way of that. Let's reach a hand down to these people, a shining hand of hope and love, and let's pick them up from the depths and the blackness of their despair. We have a unicorn on the cob, writing economics in one lesson. He shows the automation has led to vast increases in the number of total jobs. Why are people worried about automation? Well, the issue is that the types of jobs will change, and that is upsetting to people, naturally, understandably, who have trained for a very specific field and invested a lot of the time and themselves in that, and now it's all going to be, the rug is going to be pulled out from under them. And when they're white people, there isn't going to be a safety net for them. There will be a safety net for non-white people. Rest assured. There will be a safety net for non-white people who showed up here yesterday, much less non-white people who have been here their whole lives. There won't be a safety net for you. Ragnarok, your assessment was accurate enough. He believes, I believe this is talking about Varg, that whites are propping up a system against our people. So he thinks our every action should aim to starve it by not participating. Well, that can be, you think about this. If you believe that whites are propping up a system, and so you want them to starve this system, are you really promulgating the message of the need to starve the system by sequestering yourself in the countryside and telling everybody that the only proper thing to do is to have nothing to do with the system that you talk to by way of your YouTube channel. I guess that's what he has, right? Just a YouTube. Or maybe he doesn't have a board game or something as well. But I don't know if that's what he teaches with the board game. Maybe he even has a book. I'm not sure. But if you really want to bring the system down by way of this, check out of the system, stop propping it up, you need to be driving through the streets with this message, for God's sake. You need to get it to the ears and to the eyes of the white masses. And you're not going to do that from some bunker in the middle of nowhere. You're going to do that by, it's all about marketing. You come back to, and you come back to my business, where in a business sense, my mind goes, if I wanted to sell widgets to people, I'm not going to decrease my footprint of where people can find me and my widgets that are for sale. I'm going to get to the people that I want to sell widgets to. You want an idea for something that you can do this next election cycle? If you have the money, buy what in the South and probably in other parts of the country, U.S., is called a beater. So some beat up old vehicle, right? So some old vehicle that you don't mind getting damaged if it gets damaged. If you have the money for this, make it like a flatbed truck. Get some lumber, and build a frame in the bed of the truck, and then put some sort of a banner on there, paint it on there, that says read something about white well-being, no white guilt, it's okay to be white, and then drive that through the cities, folks, and get video of yourself driving that through the cities, and then post that on the internet. Then you're doing something. If I were trying to sell this check out of the system, I would be riding through the cities telling the people who are supporting the system to be checking out. I wouldn't be reaching out to the people who are already down and out, the people who are already pulling out of the system as much as they can, which, as I understand it, most of the people who follow those who say, check out of the system, stop supporting it, most of those people are, to one degree or another, already abjuring the realm, as they used to say. So those are not the people you need to be getting to. You need to be getting to all the ones who are supporting it. Get to all those white people on Wall Street. But here's the other thing as well. You're talking about selling widgets. You're trying to sell an idea to these white people who are making 6 to 7 figures a year, like in Wall Street. You're trying to sell this idea. What are they going to make living on your farm? So it's just, there are too many problems with that. This is the way to go. And again, I'm only understanding Varg by way of a couple people saying, yeah, that's basically right. So if I am misrepresenting him at all, I rescind whatever misrepresentation that is. And for whatever good he's doing, and this is always my case with everyone in the white positive sphere, including Varg, and that is whatever he or anybody else in the white positive sphere is doing that is serving white well-being and doing it in a way that corresponds with my basic Christian morality, I support all of those efforts. So if Varg is doing that, then I support all of those efforts that he is doing. We might disagree on how to go from here to there, but that is something that as men, we can disagree on, and it's okay. We should be able to disagree on. We should be able to even get loud with each other, and that's okay. Not hold animosity for it afterward, because this is about getting to a point where we can recapture our destiny. It's not about egos. If it's about an ego, stop listening to whoever that person is immediately, because they have a different objective, and it's not one that's going to do anything good for our people or you. It's something that they get pleasure from, just the simple fact that you are giving them attention. It was the turn on, tune in, and drop out. That's what it was for, doing LSD. Okay. Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Let me see here. Smoking Go, Rockwell, Friedman, Taylor, Duke, no White. Well, yeah, Taylor is Jared Taylor. I've known him since I was a very young man, and started attending his conferences when they were brand new, when they finally came to Northern Virginia, outside of Dulles Airport. So let's see what we have here. You talk about Yang like there's a better alternative. No, Mike, we've been talking tonight about false dichotomies. And I explained earlier, maybe you just got here, I explained earlier that it is natural for us to come to false dichotomies. And I have speculated in the past in different spheres of conversation that it is due to the brain having two hemispheres. And so we always look at things in a left, right, up, down, black, white, I guess, way. Even if you have multiple parties, you end up seeing yourself in the party against all of the other parties. You end up looking at it as two entities in your head, all of the other parties on one side and the party that you are on or for on the other side. So it's a false dichotomy. You're for neither. You're not for Yang. You're not for the President Trump. You're not for, I don't know, who was the woman we were talking about earlier, that the Democrats might run. You're not for her. You're not for any of them. You are for white well-being. You will use the statements of Trump that support white well-being to make your case to people for whom those statements have credence, and you will use statements against Trump for white well-being when you are trying to sell white well-being to someone for whom those types of statements are going to be valuable or believed or lend credence. You will do the same thing for Yang. We are here to serve white well-being. We're not here to serve our people. We're not here to serve a politician. You're not going to have any success by way of a political party. So let's get on to some of these things. We've talked about inflation. We talked about the stipulations. We talked about how the increase in the population is the only way to prevent inflation. We've talked about using Yang, as I just said, using President Trump's statements in both directions. We're for us. We are for none of these political parties. This is another thing that's important to remember. A lot of people have been saying that, regrettably, that if we get this $1,000, well, there's so much we can do with it that, and we can put it to the cause of white well-being, and we could invest in content producers. We could make more flyers, or we could start a website or something. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if that's where your thinking has gone, that the anti-whites are also going to be getting $1,000 apiece. And when I was on Josh's show the other night, I likened it to pouring water into a pool. When you pour water into a pool, the level of the water raises in both the shallow and the deep end equally. You're not going to end up with an edge on the anti-whites by everyone being given $1,000 a month. They will invest their money against you. And so we will end up in the same place we are today if that were to happen. So remember, you pour the water in the pool, and both the shallow and the deep ends go up equally. You do not get an edge on the anti-whites because we are given $1,000. Okay, the other big thing, I'm going to hit these, and then I want to mention this idée fixe about IQ, and then we'll wrap it up because it's really important as well, because it's another reason it's contributing to this. It's really contributing to this support of Yang. So let's go to the current welfare bureaucracy. Of course, we talked about this a little earlier, that it's not going to be extirpated from government. You're not going to be able to remove the current bureaucracy. I said earlier, Yang would have to, in my assumptions from the very beginning from the show, that I didn't share at that time because I shared it before. But you would have to essentially, fire all. How hard is it to fire one government employee now? You would have to fire the entire welfare bureaucracy, impossible. You would have people who, by the way, have contracts to work for many years in the future. People who, by the way, have their self-interest of their jobs and their families and paying for their electricity and food and healthcare, et cetera. They're not going anywhere. And not only that, but the Democrat Party is not going to allow them to go anywhere. It's not going to allow the current welfare bureaucracy to go anywhere. So there's not going to be any savings. It's not going anywhere. If UBI were implemented, which it won't be, it would be on top of the current welfare system. If it were implemented, which it won't be, the Democrats would very quickly and effectively argue that it's not legitimate for a millionaire to receive $1,000 a month or anybody above that. So immediately, bam, there goes the $1,000 to those people. And as soon as there was that fracture in the argument of universal basic income, they would say, surely you can't give only 1,000 to this non-white woman with 11 children. She needs more. And surely, if the working class family is they're doing better, the white working class family is doing a little better, even though it might be because the husband works longer hours than the non-white working class families. Well, then we need to take a little bit away from those white working class people, give it to the non-white. If you have any sense whatsoever, if you were born at night but not last night, that this is exactly what the anti-whites would do, and it would work. So there's no use in even contemplating such childish fancies. He's also said, Yang has also said that, well, illegal immigrants wouldn't get UBI. It's already illegal to give illegal immigrants welfare, and they get it. Do I need to say any more? Some of these statements. All right, let's see. Another thing that's not been talked about is public choice theory. As soon as you began giving away $1,000 to the population, that would increase the incentives for Central and South Americans to come to the United States. What do you think that would do to immigration? It would balloon like you had never seen it before. They would pour into this country. There would have to be a new bureaucracy, which would mean something that we would have to pay for, but also would mean another massive opportunity for fraud. So you're looking already at billions of dollars of fraud in Medicare, Medicaid. You would be looking at billions more in fraud from the new UBI bureaucracy. Idiocy. As I said before, the most important thing is that it would put an end to freedom of speech. This is one of the most interesting and exciting, not for this stream, perhaps for another one, as we're wrapping up here toward the end. And that is that the way you structure a society influences the genes of the people inside that society. And it does it in some superficial, but also in some really profound ways that take a lot of thinking and a lot of discussion to really wrap your head around. But we need to be in the future. And this is something, as I say, you can contemplate just for your own amusement of what a society or how our future society might have to be constructed in order to maximize our genetic potential as a people. What might that have to look like? It is not, I'm going to tell you right now, it is not going to be a society of sitting on your ass. That is not what the human animal, especially Western kind, needs. It's not going to be a society where you just sit on your ass all day long and you have nothing but time for leisure. That's more like that's lassitudinous to your grave. That's all it is. That is all it is. Leisure. You would come to indulge in every sickest fantasy. Look at that mouse experiment that they did, where they gave the mouse utopia experiment. Look at what happened to the mice. That's what would happen to man if we could create such an environment. No, we're going to have to create a very different environment that maximizes our genetic potential. And I submit to you that we can become a new people. We can become a people that is so radically different from where we are today. Once we begin to truly maximize who and what we are, that we would look back on this time as primitive as cavemen. That's how we would see ourselves today. We can do that through the proper selection of choosing our partners with whom to have children and the creation of society that incentivizes and certain behaviors and disincentivizes others, that maximize our genetic potential and truly create a master people, a people that is healthy for hundreds of years of life potentially, without having to uh, without even having to use our science to dig into DNA. We can do this. We can already do brilliant things with corn, with cattle, with dog breed. We can already do absolutely things that are considered magic to primitive peoples. We already have done and been doing that for a great many years. We could do so much more if we put our minds to it for ourselves. So a UBI society where everybody sits on their ass, if that were even possible, it's not. But if that were possible, if we could create this society of leisure, it would destroy us in short order. So I don't go to the other extreme and say no white guilt wants us all to be, work slaves or something idiotic. That's absurd. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that there is a form that we don't know yet will look like, and that will be the form that will maximize who and what we are as a people. Wouldn't you want to bequeath to the coming generations greater health, greater longevity, greater intelligence, greater beauty? I would. I want them to look back on us and praise all of our acts of heroism for them, rather than bequeath some future of sickness and ugliness, short lives, hard lives, miserable lives. In fact, we could probably now, and I think it's justifiably so, look back on the luxuries that have been created for us and in some small way damn the people for recklessly introducing it to society. I'm sure these time savers and these energy savers and the like could have been introduced in a way that would not have been as disruptive as these technologies were to our civilization. So let's move on to the final subject. I see Ross Hunter has wrote exactly. We are not here to play for their sports team. We are here to play for our team, if you will. Absolutely. Very well said. Oh, it was from, Mike said the quote that I read was from a TV show, and that I look like someone from the TV show. I will beg to differ. He looks like me. Liberty Warriors says, no white guilt. Man needs challenges to have a sense of being alive. Indeed. Absolutely. That is a lot of truth is packed into what Liberty Warrior says there. A lot of truth. We need, especially Western kind, we need a horizon to cross. We need a new disease to master. We need a new opponent to master. That is in our spirit. That is one of the things that sets us apart, is this drive in us and this thrill from achieving those victories. You take that away and we wither on the vine. We have become a sickly people as a result. Have Nick Fuentes on your show to discuss Yang. I doubt he would come. Doesn't he have a colossal I don't know anything about him. Doesn't he have a colossal channel though, where he talks to a lot of alt-light people and keeps them happy and loving the alt-light? I don't know much about him. I doubt he would appear with me, but I would happily speak with him about it. All right, the final thing I want to talk about is this idée fixe that the white positive sphere has with IQ. Now, the way this works with Yang is that I can clearly see in many of the comments that people support Yang because he's Asian, and since Asians, they understand, by way of Jared Taylor's material and some others, since they have a higher average IQ, he must be right. He must be able to figure it out. He must have a little bit higher of an IQ, and therefore what he's saying must be legit, must be able to be done. I've heard people talking about, well, no, he has this engineer's mind, and so he must already have it. No. We need to get over this idée fixe with IQ. IQ is not what separates the races of man. Please, if you take very little from this stream today, I know I'll have to talk about this many more times. IQ is not what separates us. A lot of people like to talk about IQ, especially now, since we have these test results that show that East Asians have a slightly higher average IQ, and they use it as a defense. They say, well, I'm not a X, Y, or Z because look, here I'm saying that these non-whites are superior in this way. So they use it as a shield, effectively. But that is not what separates or distinguishes the races. What distinguishes the races of man is what I refer to as the biospirit, what can be crudely understood as instinct. Every breed of dog, every race of man has a different set of instincts. Certainly, different animals altogether have different instincts. Those instincts are what we project onto our environment. And that projection then, in aggregate on our environment, is what we call culture. That is why the white race produces Western culture wherever it goes. Asians produce Asian culture where they go. Blacks produce Black culture where they go. That is the dividing line. It is not IQ. It is not IQ. Say it, and I want you this week to go into other streams and tell people this. The dividing line is not IQ, it is instinct, it is biospirit. If the white race had an average IQ of 90, we would still build Western civilization. It would still be civil, it would still look like it does. What it would have less of is the technology that we have today. That would be the only difference. It would not be a fundamentally different place. You do not take a 90 IQ white person and have effectively a Black person in front of you. Does that make sense? For God's sake, stop thinking IQ is the dividing line. It is our biospirits. It is our instinct. You do not take a white person with 109 or 8 or 7 IQ, whatever the Asian IQ is said to be, and have an Asian person. Do you? Did you suddenly have an Asian person when you have a white person with an IQ of 107? No. IQ is not the dividing line. I cannot believe that there's so many thoughts, so many erroneous and stupid ideas are so easily taken up and then promulgated. This is one of them. So if you have thought it up to this point, it's fine. But now you know that a 90 IQ white person is not Black and a 107 IQ person is not Asian. Instinct is the difference, not the computing power of the brain. We need to get away from this idea that that's the difference, because I'm not going to go into it. We can maybe have a whole stream on it. It's complicated. But if you conclude that the difference is IQ, there are a bunch of conclusions that you can't escape that are deleterious for us and our well-being. It's like you get onto a circuit board or you get onto a branch of a tree, you get onto a bough, and then you can't get off that bough. Every branch that leads off of that leads to something negative for us. So don't get off this lane. Don't get off this branch. Don't get onto this particular circuit, because there's no going back. You'll come to bad conclusions for our people. The difference is instinct. The difference is instinct. It's our biospirit. The other thing that needs to be said about instinct about IQ, is that someone who is intelligent is not always right. We just had a super chat from Pamela, $5. Thank you very much for that late super chat as we're wrapping up here. Yes, it makes sense. My favorite technology is my wood cook stove. Oh, that's probably really neat. I wish we could. I'd like to see a picture of one of those. I have, I don't personally have, but I have family who has a one of those old, I think they were called Potbellies stoves, antique, really nice. Let's see what else we have here. Nick said he would check you out. He's pissed that people don't invite him on streams. Reach out to him. Ah, well, if you know him, Mike, then tell him he can reach me by way of my website, and he'll go right to my email, and I will talk with him. I'll have him on. I'd like to have a talk with him about Yang and UBI. I told Nick you followed him on Twitter, and he said he would check you out. He complained yesterday that people stopped having him on their shows. He would accept. Okay, well, we'll have him on. Happy to speak with him. All right. So, any questions about IQ? That not being the dividing line. We are almost done, as I have to go eat, and you all probably have to as well. Yeah, I've heard that this Nick Fuentes person is a nice guy, but I really don't know anything else about him. I'm sure he's a nice guy. Misguided if he's supporting Yang, but nice guy nonetheless. Syrup asked if I will have 1 square of dark chocolate today. I'm not sure if I will have any dark chocolate today. I occasionally do. We are going to be having those health and wellness streams, and we'll be talking about, we'll bring like Mark Collette, and we'll bring on everybody on that knows some about fitness, because I want you all to be in the best shape of your lives. I want you to be healthy and to live long lives and to raise beautiful white children, or if you don't have any of your own, or they're already out of house and home, to influence other white children, to influence everybody in your life. I want you to be your best, look your best, feel your best, and be on top of the world, because that is the image that you bring when you're talking about white well-being. People are going to see you as the package for white well-being. And if you are sick and slovenly, you don't have to get away from this idea. And I talked about this shows ago. We've got to get away from this idea that you have to be like, have a model's look to your face and body, and you have to have the most expensive clothing, or get away from all of that. Just be clean cut, be in the best shape that you can be groomed, wear your clothes, the nicest clothes that you have, the ones that you would wear to church. Be the presentation, be the message that you bring for white well-being to people. Be that good person, and people will receive you. It's called the halo effect. You don't want to go to them like in that pair of jeans that you also wear when you're cleaning out the gutters on your house. Does that make sense? Don't, comb your hair. Don't leave your hair the same way that it is when you're on the creeper under the car and you're working on the exhaust or whatever. Comb your hair the way you would when you're going to a wedding. Comb your hair the way you would when you're going to church. Be the message. The halo effect is really important. Okay, Mike says to a girl, he says, me for him, he's saying, you are anti-white to some girl. And then some girl says in response, you're anti-black. And he's asking, what now? Fantastic question. Your purpose as a salesman, the most important thing that you need to know is whether or not your prospect will ever buy your product. That is the most important thing you need to know, because, excuse me, if he or she will never purchase your product under any circumstance, move on. You're just wasting your time. There are tens of millions of white brothers and sisters out there that will be receptive to you. Do not waste another second on such a person. If you get into a conversation and some anti-white is going to just keep calling you a racist, or is going to they absolutely are not going to hear the position that white people could ever have injury, that white people could ever want justice, that white people could ever deserve anything that their people have created, that they ever should inherit anything that is theirs, that they should ever be able to keep anything that they have built and is intending to pass down to their descendants. If you were up against somebody like that, you just move on. The same way you would just Move on from someone who demands money out of your pocket. The same way if somebody comes up to you and says, "Give me those shoes off your feet." You're going to say no, and then they're going to say it again. "Give me those shoes off your feet." Are you going to argue with them? You're just going to walk away. That's how you have to treat these people who are vehemently anti-white. You do not waste any moments on them whatsoever. Now, if you're dealing with, let's say you have a family member who's just going to continually say that you are a, well, let's specifically use this anti-black thing. What you don't do is you don't say, "How am I that?" No, you just stay on course. They are anti-white. It is your story that is going to be the story and context in which the discussion takes place. Your will be the superior will. Does that make sense? Let them try to draw the subject away again and again, and you will bring them back again and again to, it is anti-white. Your behavior is anti-white. Why do you have a problem with me? Why do you have a problem with our people? Whatever got you to the point where she says, "Well, you're just anti-black," she was obviously saying something that was anti-white for you to say that she was anti-white. Bring it right back to being anti-white again. Don't speak to her context. Your context is what matters. Us being at the center of our story is what matters. It is an act of the will to win that discussion, and you will have that will. If you don't have enough spine for it, I have enough to go around, and I'll give you some of mine. You will win that discussion. We are at the center of our story. We are not in the periphery. Don't let someone tell you, like I had a conversation, an email conversation the other day about something where the person was saying, you white people have had it good in Western civilization long enough. What do you mean we've had it good long enough? It is our civilization. We create it. We are the only ones who can sustain it. It is ours to ride high on, and it always will be and should be. How outrageous, we've had it long enough. We could say the same thing about every other people on earth. You could say the same thing. The Asians have had their lands long enough. They should have to turn them over. The blacks have had their lands long enough. They should have to turn them over. Of course, those anti-whites wouldn't say that, and you know they wouldn't. You know they wouldn't say that. That's how you know they're anti-white. That's why you'll keep bringing the point back to, with your will, back to the point that the person you're talking to is anti-white. And you keep bringing it back to that, and you win that discussion. Unicorn on the Cob says $100,000 for everybody a month. I like it. No, it would only be deflection. Here we have Mike asking, would it seem like you're deflecting if you bring the conversation back to or keep the conversation on the anti-white behavior of the individual who then said you were anti-black? No, in fact, it will look like she is the one who's continually trying to deflect. She had to respond to you with you're anti-black once you said that she was anti-white. She has attempted to deflect. You can immediately even say that, why do you keep trying to deflect into these other conversations? This conversation is about you and how anti-white you are. This conversation is about what you said a moment ago, which caused me to call you anti-white. You're trying to run away from the charge of being anti-white because you know how anti-white you are. You know how much you hate Western kind. You know how much you want to inflict harm on Western kind and Western civilization. That's why you keep trying to bring up all of these other groups. That's why you keep trying to deflect. That's how you win that conversation. I tell you, my friend, I've never lost one, and I never will. Zachary asks, can you sign up as a Brave publisher so people can donate BAT tokens using the Brave browser? I have no idea what that is. Please go to my website, knowwhyguilt.org. Reach out to me by way of my website and let me know what that is. I'm interested. I have no idea. Never heard of it. It sounds like it has some potential. Okay, so we've talked about IQ is not the divider, distinguishing line between or among the different races. People who have a high IQ are not always right. That's the second thing. And we're wrapping this up, folks. So final thoughts from you all. And I'll make my final thoughts here. People with a high IQ are not always right. And then I'm going to make the most important point, I think, of this particular idée fixe. So just because you've concluded, or just because somebody has held up a little badge that says their IQ is X, Y, or Z, that doesn't mean that they're right. That doesn't mean that the answers that they're going to give you are automatically correct. There have been geniuses that have said and done and experimented with the most ignorant and asinine and backward ideas imaginable. Because sometimes that intelligence, well, this goes into a broader conversation about what intelligence is. And unfortunately, it's a very complex thing. But intelligence is not like height. This is a really important thing, and itself could take 30, 45 minutes to talk about, but we're not going to. It's not like height. So if you have somebody that's 5'4" and somebody that's 6 feet, the 6-foot person is taller. That's not how intelligence works. We attempt to measure G, or the processing, the raw computing power of the brain, through these tests that we call IQ tests. It's not the best way to measure intelligence. We may come up with better ways in the future. The reason why it's not is because IQ, or intelligence, is not like height. Somebody who has a 120 IQ, it does not mean automatically that that person is going to be able to do X, Y, or Z better than you at 100 IQ, for example. Because IQ, or intelligence, is not this linear thing. It's more like if you can imagine a sine wave. Everybody knows what that is, right? With sound. Imagine a sine wave, and then imagine that repeated around a 360-degree radius, so that the sine waves are going all of these different directions, some shorter, some longer. If you can hold that image in your mind, and each of these little lines extending away from that central hub is an amount of computing power in a given, or a given. Now, I don't even say like a sector, but even smaller than that, a percent of a sector of thought, of, say, ability to compute in your head mathematical equations, or compute dates, or disembroil any sort of particular scenario, like, let's say, oh, I don't know, maybe we were talking about economics earlier. So how specifically products can be sold at the entrance to the store. So you have the actual the leader product, which is sold at a loss, and then you have the products that are marked up for that. How do you solve the situation of getting those sold, and then the secondary products sold? This much more complex situation, these different lines leading out to different capacities, different limitations as well, different strengths, different weaknesses, is what intelligence is. That is why you can have somebody who, say, has a above average IQ and can do calculations in their head, but they're dumb as a rock when it comes to something else. It's not true that somebody who has a 110 IQ is automatically going to be better at everything than somebody who has a 100 IQ, if that makes sense. So IQ is not like height. Or intelligence is not like height. It's far more complicated. Somebody with a 110 or 150 IQ is not like a 6-foot tall person relative to a 5-foot tall person. It's much more complex. Now, having said that, I mean, you get big enough gaps, and you're going to have people who have so much more ability over the span of that 360 sine wave that they are likely to do most things better than you, and maybe wherever you are on the scale, maybe all things better than you. But it is not as simplistic as height. But that's how everybody looks at it. They conclude, or they hear that somebody has an IQ of whatever, and then they make to the erroneous deduction that, well, they must be right about everything. It's simply not the case. It's important to appreciate and understand that. And finally, that leads into the final subject, which is which is really, I think, probably the most important that we need to take away from this idea of IQ. Chuck Ford, super chat with $2. Thank you very much. I hope Yang doesn't end up dividing our movement. I can't see how he could. I can't see anything. Anyone who is a Yang supporter, UBI supporter, direct them to this Going Free stream. They will not be able to rebut these positions. And so that if they're honest people, that should be the end of it. I mean, it's the bottom line. Let's see. Roy Danton, super chatting $4.99. Thank you so much for this valuable advice on how to argue with normies. It is so inspiring and powerful. Thank you very much, Roy. You are such a hero in our community, a hero among heroes. Thank you for being here. Mike writes, I would love to see you debate. I couldn't find any debates with you. Have an anti-white on and debate him. I would love to see well, I tell you, you can find discussions on threads that I've had with people. And many places, though, Mike, you'll find they've deleted their participation in the argument that they had with me because they end up looking so bad on the thread that they don't want to leave that up for people. Very rarely they leave them up, but you can find them here and there where they actually argued with me in a thread, and you'll see how they end up back on their heels, and they're trying the entire time to defend themselves. They're trying the entire time to, and when they're not, when they're just vehemently anti-white, then you'll see how I dispatch with them and move on, because that's the only thing you can do with some of these people. So Elaine Sabatino writing, I'm more concerned about the JQ than IQ. Well stated, Elaine, well stated. And by the way, the Jewish people do not get their strength from a supposed superiority of IQ or elevated IQ. I think it's been discussed before that the testing that was done for this IQ elevation in the Ashkenazic community was taken from, I think, private Jewish schools where you had to be not only Jewish, but you had to be like at the top of the community in intelligence. And then they measured those people for their IQs. This is what I've read before. I saw one study that was taken from a private Jewish school that was Ashkenazic, and they said, well, look at the IQ here. So I'd like to see more. But their strength doesn't come from their IQ. Their IQ could be the same as ours or lower than ours, doesn't matter. The strength comes from the ideology that welds them together as a people and that always turns them back toward each other, even when they disagree vehemently. That's why you very often will see Jewish people who argue like just rabidly with each other, but then at the end of the day come together as Jews for Jews. That is what sustains them, not their IQ. That's another thing that the white positive sphere has gotten wrong with this hyper focus on Jews rather than on us as a people. Is this just endless focus on Jews, and well, they have this higher IQ, and it's almost like a surrender to them. Let me see here. Really is the bio spirit, courage, wisdom, character, honor. Beautiful. Absolutely. We have so many intelligent people in this community. Oh, you want to know where those studies were found? I'll have to go find them. It's been like the last time that I read the one that was done in the Jewish private school for Ashkenazi Jews. That was maybe 10 years ago. I'll have to find it again. Oh, your threads. You're talking about the threads. Oh, well, there were a few on maybe as many as 6 or 7 on Instagram, where I had these women who were viciously anti-white, and they showed up. The last one was great. I think it's still up. I'm not sure under which picture it was under. But yeah, she just showed up. She found one of my pictures, probably thought I was attractive, and then saw the opinions that I held and decided that she was going to criticize me. She was going to put me in my place, by calling me one of these slurs, these anti-white slurs. So I just went back after her. And Mike, by the end of that conversation, she was saying, but really, I'm not anti-white. But really, I promise I'm not anti-white. So it was a beautiful thing to behold. But then there are um, videos, threads under some of my earlier videos where there were arguments that I had with people, and you should be able to find some there. But I will, as far as debating, I mean, that's the thing is, I talked about earlier, you can't debate with someone who has a different destination or a different objective than you have, because really all you're just shouting about whose interests or whose morality is better. In the case of an anti-white, the anti-white would be saying, my morality, the anti-whites, is superior to no white guilts. And I would be saying, no, my morality is better. So you see, it's not really a debate. I mean, if you'd like to see me just humiliate an anti-white, maybe I'll go out on the streets and bring a cameraman and find an anti-white to humiliate at one of the local universities. But the final thing I want to say about intelligence is that, what does an intelligent person look like? And we're going to wrap up the stream on this. And I want audience participation. I want you all in the community to participate here. What does intelligence look like? Or what do you think that most people think intelligence looks like? In other words, I'm maybe making that a little clearer. What does the body of an intelligent person look like? What is the mental state of an intelligent person? Someone who is above intelligence, highly intelligent. What do you think what have you been trained by Hollywood when it comes to highly intelligent people? What do they look like? What do those characters look like? And as a result, what do you end up looking for out in your environment? You can't determine a person's IQ. I mean, that's absolutely true, Roy. But what are people, Roy, what are people looking for? What are these external markers? Because you know that people do it. No homo, I trust that you're gonna, there's nothing there that would, none of my pictures on Instagram are out of place, so nothing is untoward. Syrup says, imagine trying to put no white guilt in this place. Some very silly women have tried in the past, and they came away from that probably horny. All right, let's see. Is anybody saying thick glasses? Okay, Underhill. Good. Good, good, good. Skinny, a congenial wisdom. Skinny with glasses and nerdy. Good. Glasses mean you're smart. I am 160. Okay, good. Well, now Leo says good posture, eye contact, well spoken. Now, is that always what we see in the characters? I mean, that is like a genuinely, when you see people who are like above average in functionality, that's something that you see them do when they can function well in society. That's traits of those people. Do we not a big head? Yes. Well, I mean, a tiny brain, I haven't seen work well for intelligence, but it could get proven wrong, I guess, at some point in the future. I mean, certainly different species have larger brains and are not quite as intelligent. Let me ask you all this. What about, do we not often see great intelligence and characters in movies and in stories put into the bodies of cripples? Do we not regularly see in our stories and our movies the brilliant man and the brilliant woman who are who can't comb their hair or who can't tie their shoes, who are dysfunctional in some way, maybe significantly dysfunctional. Indeed, what have we seen in the white positive sphere over the past couple years about who is intelligent? What do we call them? What do we say about them? What illness? What is the most common illness that we say that someone is suffering from and that automatically they are geniuses? People automatically think they're geniuses. People have turned this into it's actually kind of quite sad. Broken people have magic powers, right? Ross points out. We have a super chat of 50 Swedish Corona. Thank you so very much. From Casual Cruising. Since accepting this halo effect you mentioned, I've shed over 20 kilograms and dedicated myself to a proper trade. You help me stay on track. Thank you. God bless you, bro. Thank you very much for sharing your testimony of going free and how it's improving your life. All of you, I would like to see all of you sharing your testimony, not just of going free, not just here on Going Free streams, but on other streams as well. Let people know in those chats that they too should be going free, that these good effects have come to you for taking up this cause of white well-being, for going free. Autism. There we go. Asperger's. So we see now it's like this big joke, isn't it? It's dreadful. They say, well, this person is an autiste. That person is autistic and therefore brilliant. Wrong. Wrong. Autism is a handicap. Being autistic, suffering from Asperger's is a handicap. It is not a sign of genius. Yes, there are rare occasions when people who suffer from autism or Asperger's or some of these others that people are noting, some other handicaps as well, that in rare cases you have people who are intelligent in a specific area, brighter than average in a specific area, but otherwise they are handicapped. A perfect example of one of these people is the savant known as Kim Peek. I don't know if you all have ever heard of him before, but would you rely on him for anything? He can read verifiably. He has more abilities than any other savant on planet Earth that I've heard of. This has been a title of his acclaim. He has like a handful of abilities he can do. He can do the calendar. He can do a range of things because of his severe handicaps. One of the things he can do is that he can open a book and he can read the verso page with his left eye and the recto page with his right eye at the same time. And he has a perfect recall for what he just read. Just a snap of the fingers, he knows everything that's on the page. Now, are you going to trust him on what's wrong with your car or how to get from one town to the next town? Are you going to trust him on how to save our people? Are you going to trust him on how to take care of your baby? Kim Peek, folks, can't take himself to the bathroom. He can't tie his shoes. Genius is not in the body of handicaps. Salvation is not in the personality and in the capacity of dysfunction. Stop looking for sick and broken people, dysfunctional people, for the answers to recapture our destiny. The answers are not going to come from the handicapped. They can contribute, but being able to multiply 11 digits in your head at one time, or having a photographic memory, does not mean that trait, that skill, that above average ability that has been created because there's a broken part of the person's brain, that does not mean that person is going to have the answers for you. Indeed, that broken part of the brain is what's going to end up leading you into perdition. Too often, we end up following people who have no idea what they're talking about, who have some bizarre skill because some part of their brain is ruined from a seizure at birth or some deformation when they were children or in their genetic code, and they develop some sort of skill along with their weaknesses. And people look to them because of what we've learned in the media, because we have learned that genius is going to come in the body of a little hobbling, weird looking, goofy individual who can't get along, who's dysfunctional, who can't barely get by in life, but somehow they're going to be your great leaders. Think again. Folks, the hero is in you. The hero is in me. It's in all of us. You have to look within. Don't trust anything anybody tells you outright. You have to examine these things for yourselves. You have to take this ball into your hands, to use the sports ball analogy. Don't look, to harken back to earlier in the stream, to a politician, whether it's a Trump or a Yang, to carry you to victory, to carry us to our destiny. Don't look outside of our community. Don't put your faith in political parties. Don't put your faith in cripples who have some extraordinary ability in one area of their broken minds. Look to yourself for what needs to be done. Look to our fellow brothers and sisters. I will be there for you, and you will be there for me. And together, we all will come together and recapture our destiny. Let's go free, folks. And I look forward to seeing you all maybe this Friday again on another Going Free stream. I love you all. Tomorrow, and our destiny is ours.